Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lorehammer. You might notice if you're on the live stream something a little bit different is Mark is on vacation. So I will be replacing him for this episode as Nega Mark, which means that all Space Marines are women and we love Primaris.
He shot his shot. He waited to take over the podcast and he shot his shot.
All hail Fuzz, the new Lorehammer.
But, my name is Fuzz. I am honored to be here as a guest host with the other hosts here. Definitely, totally for the last time is Christian. And we've also got our wonderful friend, Logan. How's it going,
everyone?
guys?
Hey.
Good. I feel underdressed. You guys both have a lot on, and I'm just wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
Hawaiian shirts can be Space Wolf themed.
True.
Right? That's their casual Friday gear.
Yeah.
True. I like that lore. It's official now.
Right. So, a little housekeeping real quick. We've got a wonderfully active Discord. I know that's, for myself, how I kind of got really into this community. There's links in the description for it. It's great. There's people there. We talk about all sorts of stuff from lore, hobbying, modeling questions and answer stuff. It's a great time. It is sometimes a wild time.
Yeah. And one day you too might be able to guest host or even take over the Lorehammer podcast if you're in the Discord long enough. Another great thing, if you join the Imperial Tithe and help support the show, you can get an ad-free version of the show for only $2.50 a month. Or you can get on the video version for $5 and look at our beautiful costumes for our Space Wolf themed episode.
Yeah, and if you do join the Imperial Tithe and look at the underwear Christian has on his head, you also can join our live stream. And if you're in the live stream, you can chat with us during the show to tell us how wrong we are, which is frequently. And you can come in at the end to correct us, which Fuzz has done to me twice.
I'd say definitely at least twice.
At least twice.
Probably more in the future.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm always wrong.
All right, so that being said, today we are doing Leman Russ Origins and the Great Crusade. Some things we'll be touching on is, going over a little bit of the Primarch project, just for that quick background information, the time on Fenris, the coming of the Emperor, and of course, some of the ever-popular sections like War Gear. Everyone loves a good weapon and armor set.
Yeah. I was gonna wear my furry mask today, but unfortunately it's at the dry cleaners. I won't say why. Wild weekend parties. I can't read anything with that on. I apologize. But yeah, let's get into it. Leman Russ, his origins, and the Great Crusade. Leman Russ, the Wolf King and Great Wolf, is a legendary Primarch of the Space Wolves, now lost to the annals of time. His roar once shook the battlefield as he led his warriors in the Great Crusade and through the fires of the Horus Heresy, a mighty titan whose strength was almost unmatched. He was fierce in spirit. He despised the foul sorcery of psychers, for he believed only the raw might of true warriors had a place in battle. To him, any who relied on such treachery were unworthy of the Emperor's wrath. Together with his brothers Angron and Vulcan, Russ was known as one of the greatest duelists among the Primarchs. His strength, his rage, his loyalty to the Emperor was unmatched. He was a barbarian in the truest sense, for his soul was bound to the master of mankind, and he would cleave through enemies with the wrath of the Emperor's will. Among the cursed legions of chaos, he was called the Brawler, a name that echoed through the heavens, for none could stand against the storm of Leman Russ. So Russ, for those, it's hard to talk about the Space Wolves because they're one of those factions that everybody, it's like the Ultramarines, like everybody has some familiarity with the Space Wolves. But for those very few people who aren't aware, Space Wolves very heavy on the wolf theme, obviously in the name, and very heavy on the Viking theme, which will come out as we read through this episode. And obviously, their Primarch embodies both of those aspects to the nth degree.
Yeah, everybody's heard of the Space Vikings of Warhammer 40K.
Yeah, it's funny you said the way they were originally described to me when I was getting into the hobby is they were the werewolves and the blood angels were the vampires. So everyone kept calling them Team Edward and Team Jacob, and that was my first introduction.
What an unfortunate introduction.
Oh no.
Well, for the longest time, I'm like, yeah, the Space Wolves are werewolves. I just ran with that because that's what I thought in my head. And then I learned about it. I'm like, oh, someone was messing with me. Oh, no.
I mean, they're not totally off base, but no,
Yeah,
they're not
the
quite.
bits are there. Yeah.
The Wolfen are there. It's close enough.
Mhm.
All right. The Primarch Project and the Legiones Astartes. In the long forgotten age, when Terra stood alone, wreathed in strife and shadow, the All-Father, the Emperor of Mankind, forged his greatest champion, 20 warlords, champions, 20 warlords carved from the marrow of the gods and fire of the warp, shaped to be his shield and his sword. These were the Primarchs, titanic beings of unyielding strength, each wrought with a purpose, each destined for conquest. Yet fate, cruel and capricious, cast them into the winds of the great void before their time. A great calamity, whispered of in fearful tones, tore them from their place of making. The Primarchs, still in their birthing cradles, were wretched away from the tides of the Immaterium, scattered to the cold stars. No sooner had the Emperor grasped at them than they were lost. But he would not falter. From the remnants of their divine essence, he forged new warriors, lesser in form but mighty beyond mortal reckoning. These were the Legiones Astartes, warriors clad in ceramite and wrath, bearing the blood of their sundered sires. Thus, the Space Marine legions were born, each a reflection of the Lord from whom their strength was taken. Of course, the fiercest and most savage bore the marks of the Wolf King, Leman Russ, whose blood ran hot with the fury of Fenris, whose sons would howl his name until the stars grew cold. Their bodies were hewn from the Canis Helix, their souls bound by unbreakable law of pack and kin. Wolf Fuzz. That's funny, Jax. At this time, the emperor knew not where his lost sons had been cast, nor what trials they had endured in their exile. But the age of the Great Crusade, when the legions marched across the void like a storm of fire and steel, he would seek them out. One by one, the lost lords were found, hardened by the cruel lands that had tempered them. Among them, a world of ice and beasts, where only the strong survived. He found Russ, wolf-hearted, war-crowned, and loyal beyond measure. The Lord of Fenris had returned, and with him, the howling of wolves would shake the heavens.
Yeah, we've touched on the Primarch project like a lot. Well, I say we. You guys have touched on the Primarch project a lot in different episodes. But one thing I personally like wasn't aware of until recently was like how much of their making was like putting some sort of like warp essence into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were like the Primarchs themselves. And I don't know if this lore has changed since I read this far into the Horus Heresy, but the Primarchs themselves have had the essence of the warp in their very forging. Like there is something about them that is intrinsically tied to the warp on a different level than just like a soul. Like they were made of the warp. And from that older, well, I don't know if it's older lore, but the Horus Heresy lore, the Emperor himself allegedly may even have made a deal with the Chaos Gods or with Chaos itself in order to forge these Primarchs. But yeah, pretty much any Primarch episode is going to start pretty much the same. They were all built in this lab all together, all 20 of them, or 21. And then they all get scattered into the warp. Like this is very, like you're going to hear it every time we talk about a Primarch. And then it's just a question of where did they end up? On what world, and then the question comes out of, you know, how much was inherent in the Primarch in terms of their genetics and stuff that made them who they are, and how much was part of the world they landed on and their upbringing and all that. So
yeah,
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I forgot about Alpha Legion for a second, so I was like, "There's a secret legion." I got really excited with this new lore you were about to drop on me.
21
I'm like,
Primarchs. Yeah.
Right. New lore drop from Christian.
yeah, what?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
kind
one
of
thing for this opening part that I think we'll see a lot throughout the Russ episodes, but also the Space Wolves episode, is the theme of like that like unyielding loyalty to each other, especially.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
They're even in books, I'm kind of jumping ahead, even in books that aren't about the Space Wolves pop out a lot as kind of being the watchdogs of the other legions just because of how loyal they were.
pun intended.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, because it's, I can't remember, it's one of the books with Korax, but there was a wolf squad that was sent just to sit and watch him. And Korax literally said, "Are you just here to watch me?" And they're like, maybe,
Pretty much.
maybe.
Who is more loyal than a dog? I ask you.
Right.
True.
Maybe a wolf. In this case, the wolf child. So the wolf child comes to Fenris. From the heavens he fell, a child of war cast into the icy jaws of Fenris. His birthing cradle, a star-forged pod of steel and flame, tore into the flank of a mountain, leaving a wound upon the world. Any lesser being would have perished in the merciless cold, their bones swallowed by the frost. But this was no mere child. This was Leman Russ, a son of the Allfather, born for battle, born for dominion. Through the smoke and ruin of his landing, the infant Primarch beheld his first trial. A mother thunderwolf, vast as a war beast, her fangs long as swords, stood before him. To any other she would have been death, but in Russ she saw not prey nor trespasser, but a cub of her own spirit, and so she took him into her pack, raising him amidst the hunters of the night, his brothers, not men, but wolves. The tale of Russ's ascension is sung in the sagas of Njarl, the elder, wise in the ways of old Fenris, a skald of King Thengir's court. He spoke of the hell winter that changed the course of fate when a hunting band of men came upon the pack. They saw only beasts, their hearts filled with steel and fire, and so they struck. The mother wolf fell beneath spear and arrow, her cubs slain in the bloodied snow. But Russ, the wolf child, would not yield. He rose in wrath, his bare hands weapons enough to break men, his howls a dirge of vengeance. A dozen warriors fell before his fury, and still he fought on, shielding his last two kin, Freki and Gary. Then came the turning of the fates. One among the hunters, seeing through the savagery, beheld the truth. The boy was no beast, but a man, a warrior born. A cry went up, and the weapons were lowered. Russ, blood-drenched and unbowed, watched them with the eyes of a predator, but he knew their meaning. He stayed his hand, and they brought him to King Thengir, the wolf lord of the Russ tribe, a man of wisdom as well as might. Thengir looked upon the wild youth and did not see a monster nor an enemy, but a warrior fit for the halls of Fenris. He took Russ into his house, giving him a place among men. Some called it folly, others blasphemy, but Thengir's will was iron. Time would prove him right, for the wolf child of Fenris would rise to become its king. Yeah, that's what a way to start your warrior career, is being raised by wolves and just with your bare hands as probably a 10-year-old just like tearing down like this hunting party.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing people always got to remember is like Primarchs are godlike even as children. All the Primarchs, not all, but most of the Primarchs have some kind of like really early childhood encounter with beasts or people that are trying to kill them, and they kill them all because they are beyond anything a human could be, like even as a child.
Yeah.
It's interesting with such nerds that the history nerds that the GW writers were, that they went with one raised by a wolf, but they didn't go with the Romulus and Remus route. They went with more the beastie route with his growing up.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that too. Yeah, especially for like the Viking myth, and then you insert a little bit of Roman mythology.
Yeah,
and
like it was right there. They could have just followed that, but they chose to go
really
animal Viking.
Should have been Gulliman's origin story.
True.
So I was looking at this a little bit, just to used to be much huger into like Norse mythology than I am now. But like wolves do come into play like a lot in the Norse sagas. Not necessarily raised by wolves, but like wolf companions. Actually, like Freki and Gary are the name of like Odin's wolf companions that he has. A lot of like warriors and like witches like ride wolves and things. So it's the wolf theme does still have a ton of like importance and symbolism, to Norse mythology. But yes, the actual like raised by wolves, I was trying to find some example in like the old sagas about that, and I could not.
Yeah, because it comes from the Roman sagas.
Yeah. One thing I would like in that section I was also thought was interesting is like that like Canis Helix that like Erda and the Emperor put into him, that is like what the Thunderwolf sensed.
Yeah, I wonder too. That's interesting. Not I don't know if we mentioned it in this episode, but not to give away too many spoilers, there is also a very well-known saying about no wolves on Fenris, and that has its own backstory there too. So I wonder how that plays into things, but that shouldn't affect Russ, because Russ was made in a lab far away from Fenris, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah, that is an interesting thought.
Maybe he got it through the wolf mother's milk.
Gross.
He was raised by a. What do you mean gross? He was raised by a wolf. How did she
There's
feed him?
nothing more natural than a wolf.
I mean, he's gotta drink something.
Yeah. Exactly. Although
it's
he was
Primarch. Sorry,
go ahead. I was gonna say he's got godlike powers. Maybe he's just pounding beers and grog or whatever they had.
Even as an infant.
Yeah, as a toddler. They just drop him in the thing because he's too big or too small to carry it.
Yeah. They just dunk him. Yeah. Baptism by beer. Yes.
Right.
Right
in the keg.
Yeah. And as Space Fuzz was saying, let's talk about Freki and Gary. And sorry, my Nordic pronunciations are not what they should be, but we're gonna have to deal with it. Freki and Gary, the legendary wolves of Leman Russ, were his kin from the moment the Wolf King was cast upon the brutal shores of Fenris. Raised by the great Fenrisian she-wolf, these mighty beasts were bound to him by blood and fate, their spirits as untamed as the world that birthed them. Freki, the fierce and fiery of the two, was a wolf of rage, his heart burning with the fury of the storm. Gary, on the other hand, was the elder, wise beyond measure, and a wolf of patience, his mind sharp as the frost that clung to Fenris's peaks. Together, they embodied the wild primal force of Fenris, freedom and ferocity tempered by wisdom. Their bond with Russ was unbreakable, as if the very winds of their homeworld had stitched their souls together, destined to walk as one in the forge of battle. Their legacy endures in the tales of the Great Hunt. Freki and Gary are said to live far longer than their kind, their endurance matching that of the stars themselves. They were the living avatars of Fenris, wolves whose strength and loyalty could never be doubted. When the thunderous roar of war reached across the galaxy, these colossal beasts, one black as the depths of night and the other white as the fierce snowstorms that gripped their home, stood at the side of their master, Leman Russ. The world trembled beneath their paws as they fought beside their Primarch, their loyalty as unyielding as the ice-capped mountains of Fenris. They were not mere beasts, but legends, their names etched in the very myth of the Space Wolves and the heart of the Wolf King himself. So yeah, kind of as Buzz mentioned, obviously drawn from Norse mythology with Odin's twin wolves. The other thing too that actually plays a big role in Nordic mythology, and I'll get into this more when we talk about Fenris the planet, is this duality that's always there, right? One wolf is fierce and brash, the other one is like wise and thinking. And these contradictions also exist within like Leman Russ himself. He's often like portrayed as this like wild beast man, but he is a deep thinker as well, and like a strategist, and does think ahead. He isn't just like fiery and petulant.
Yeah, definitely has that like wisdom side to him. There was something else I was just gonna say. I definitely think it'll be important to keep in mind. Also, like at least in the back of your mind, that idea of it talking about the wolves being like the living avatars of Fenris as we go, through more of the episode. And just like that the planet has some sort of like will like that.
Yeah, there's almost like a world spirit or something in it.
Yeah, similar like back when we talked about Chagoras with Khan.
Yeah. On that note too, in the chat, who do you think is more of a deep thinker, Khan or Russ? And Jack says cuss. They are both.
Cuss.
So, yeah. It seems to be a theme that GW likes, is like the noble savage kind of barbarian, but also deep thinker type.
Yeah, the like warrior poet idea kind of.
I think I remember there's some snippet in one of the stories where Russ is talking to one of his brothers, and he basically admits that he fakes being as savage as he is a lot because it intimidates his other brothers. And I don't know if that's right or not, but I remember hearing about that he is smarter than he acts.
Yeah, that sounds vaguely right to me. Like, I feel like I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
I find that hilarious because maybe his brothers aren't intimidated and they're like, stop peeing on the couch kind of thing. Like, he thinks, that like edgy kid who thinks he's like super edgy, but he's just a weirdo. That's Russ.
I like Russ being the edgiest of all the Primarchs. He's like,
yeah.
Grr.
Yeah, exactly.
Gilliman has like a rolled up newspaper, just like, no, stop it.
The real edgy Primarchs are just embarrassed. They're like, oh, don't look at us.
Korax is in the corner just putting his hair over his face. Yeah.
You don't understand.
Korax is in the corner like challenge accepted.
Yeah. I'll be edgier than
you edgelords, yeah.
Right.
Nothing personal, kid, just jumping behind each other.
Right. But he is raised by royalty, so he would have that sort of kingly education.
Ravens also do play a prominent role in Norse mythology too, so there could be something there.
Oh yeah. I like Purge's comment in the chat. Is he the Kyle of Warhammer? I can absolutely see Russ just slamming down a monster and charging head first into something.
Smashing all the drywall in your house, yes.
Oh yeah.
The 3 slashes of the monster can, it's really for the wolves of Fenris.
Yes.
I approve this message.
New lore, dude. We're so much new lore tonight that we're just learning and not making up on the spot. It's great. All right, let's talk about the planet Fenris. Fenris is a world of unrelenting brutality, a death world wreathed in ice and fire. Its surface is a shifting battlefield between the crushing cold of Hellwinter and the molten fury of volcanic upheaval, which I did not know. Great glaciers dominate the land, their vast frozen bulk grinding against the jagged mountains that claw at the sky. When Fenris's erratic orbit draws it closer to its sun, the ice melts and the land is swallowed up by turbulent seas, only for winter to return and freeze the world anew. The oceans churn with monstrous beasts, their colossal forms breaking the surface like leviathans of legend, while the land is stalked by creatures born of nightmare, massive thunderwolves, razor-fanged ice trolls, and the behemoth Fenrisian mammoths. I want that on the tabletop. Let's go. Here, the land itself rages war against those who dare call it home. The people of Fenris are as fierce and unyielding as the world that forged them. Divided into warring tribes, they survive by strength alone, for weakness is swiftly culled by the unforgiving land. They are hunters, reavers, and warriors, clad in furs and steel, wielding axes as an extension of their very souls. When the great hell winters come, the weak perish, and only the strongest endure, proving their worth through battle, blood, and the ever-present struggle for survival. Their lives are dictated by the will of the gods they invoke, the spirits they honor, and the sagas they weave into the heart of battle. Honor and loyalty are their currency, for treachery is met with swift and brutal justice. They are a people who live and die by the sword, their names carved into legend only if they are mighty enough to earn it. It was upon this savage world that Leman Russ, the Wolf King, was raised, and it was here that his sons, the Space Wolves, still reign. That's a cool. I didn't know the planet turned into volcano at certain points. I thought it was always frozen. That's really cool.
Yeah.
To learn.
Yeah,
with that orbit. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go first.
So yeah, like with the erratic orbit, yeah, especially like melting and refreezing, and like now I'm curious like how long that cycle is. Like if you're just a normal human, living on Fenris, is it like do you just never see that change except for like once in like several generations, or do you see it like a couple times? Like how often does that happen?
Yeah. I don't know how often it changes, but that is an interesting thought of like, yeah, in your lifetime, you would never see the summer or you would never see the winter. Like you were born and raised in an era completely consumed by it. And yeah, as you said, Logan, I can't believe we just haven't brought up the Logan Grimnar joke yet either. By the way.
I'm like
Grimnar himself with us. Yes.
We're 30 minutes in and we haven't brought up my namesake. Yeah. I love this.
But yeah, sorry, Fenris. I lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, a lot of people don't know the volcanic aspect of it as well, and that does also come again from like that Nordic theme. Obviously, like a lot of the Nordic countries do have volcanoes, and they do have that contrast of winter and heat and lava, and that of course gets weaved into their mythology. You even see it in things like My Name Today, the Game of Thrones franchise, to A Song of Ice and Fire. Like it's and it goes back to that duality that they find a lot in Norse mythology.
Yeah. Purge in the chat says it's Planet X, just with wolves instead of the serpentine people.
What's that from? Planet X?
What was the name of that movie? I know that I've heard it referenced in more movies than I've actually like seen the movie that it's in. But it's an old campy sci-fi movie.
Okay. I was thinking Marvel for some reason, but
it's also a scientific thing. The hypothetical Planet X.
Yes.
From NASA.gov. It has not been discovered, but it's theorized to exist, and this is kind of what it might be like.
Like Fenris?
Yeah.
You actually trust what NASA says? That's so crazy. I'm
we're
not going down that road.
Do not. If there's a flat earther, I will hurt your feelings.
So that, yeah, Logan can talk about that on his. Damn it, Mark. I say, Logan, you can talk about Planet X on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, that'll be the next video, guys. Hypothetical planets. We're gonna go right from cryptids to hypothetical planets with nothing in between, because that's clearly the next logical step.
But if you do want to see like a cool depiction of Fenris in Hammer Bolter from Warhammer TV, they have one of their episodes on that is the initiates of the Space Wolves, like going through their challenges on Fenris. And so you do get to see some of the beasts and the harsh climate they have to endure. It's really, really neat, especially from that aspect of it.
Yeah. Fenris is very much a death world. Like
the
climate is going to kill you. The animals on it are going to kill you. It is, and it breeds the strong people that are survivalists, and that's perfect breeding ground for Space Marine stock as well.
So Fenris is Australia. We just
cold Australia.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's Arctic Australia.
Which is pretty much just Canada, because Canada, I would say, it's just cold Australia. So,
is it? Are there really? I guess there are moose.
Have you heard of a bear? Yeah, bears and
mooses are also terrifying.
Dude, I live in a state full of poisonous animals all the time. I would much rather deal with a bear.
Oh, you have not fought a bear, let me tell you. Or a noble puma.
Yeah, I say
I have dealt with a puma before. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, see, I tell everyone it's not that crazy. You could fight a puma.
I was better armed than the puma, so it was a short
conversation.
There you
go. That's just cheating.
Well, that's why I'd rather deal with the bear. I can't do that to a cockroach, but I can 100% do that to a bear.
I mean, you could do it to a cockroach. It would just be, a little bit excessive.
Who would win, Christian or a bear? It depends. Are they fighting or doing push-ups?
Playing poker.
Or playing poker.
Right. See, now I need to see a bear's playing poker painting to replace all the dogs.
I'm going to Google, see if that's a thing. Oh yeah, no, almost that exact painting has been redone with bears before.
I love it.
Excellent.
All right.
But yeah, there's a ton more about Fenris that'll be in future episodes.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll learn that they do in fact wear Hawaiian shirts when they're in their lava season, because that seems appropriate to me.
I
That would
told you,
be
man.
delightful. I love it.
That or funnier, they just take off the chest plate, but they keep the rest of the armor on, so it's just it's just shredded
Bare
six pack.
chested.
Yeah, just bare chested, but they've got the pauldrons and everything.
It's
There's
a different
Hawaiian printed ceramite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's go.
I was gonna say it's a different kind of bear that you find at a club, not in the wild.
Hey, there we go.
Is that the bear you're fighting or a real bear?
We're not fighting.
I say the three of us are fit that description.
Very well.
All right, so moving on from that.
I've never
So-
thought of that before. I'm just like, do I?
Yes. The things we learn on Lorehammer,
A lot of new lore tonight.
right? So speaking of learning to be human. Among men for the first time, the wolf child proved swift to learn. He took to the ways of war as if born wielding steel, his hands finding their place upon axe and sword with savage grace. He roared with laughter in the feast halls, bellowed songs and voices both tuneless and mighty, yet in the quiet of battle's pause, a truth settled upon him. He was neither fully man nor fully wolf, but greater than both. When in their third clash, he wrenched the battle axes from the hands of the king's own champion and returned them without malice. Thengir saw the path carved by fate. The youth's place was beyond warrior, beyond chieftain. He was bound for something far greater. His voice, once wild howls, soon carried the weight of command, shaping the rough tongue of Fenris into something near to poetry. And so, on a night of fire and frost, King Thengir stood before his people and called the young warrior by a name not given lightly. He was Leman of the Russ, blood of the wolf and lord of the hunt. As he grew, so did his legend. No warband could stand against him, no beast could match his fury. He led his people to 1,000 victories and more, his name sung in the long nights and whispered in the cold dark. When Thengir fell, old and battle-weary, there was no question of who would take his place. Leman of the Russ ascended the throne, crowned not with gold, but with the steel of his foes and the oaths of his warriors. Thus was the Wolf King's saga forged, a tale sung across all of Fenris. And beyond the howling storms of that world, another listened. Far away, a great ruler, a warlord clad in light, caught whispers of a name lost to time. The hunt for his wayward son had begun.
Yeah,
So,
another common theme with all the Primarchs. You're kind of going to hear a lot about, how they were forged and how they got scattered, and the other thing is how they rise to prominence on the planets that they land on. All the Primarchs have a story of their ascension, essentially, all except for Angron, the failed son.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely seems like usually, at least from the ones that I'm more familiar with, it is. Rightfully so. They come down as kids, as babies, and prove their worth to basically some sort of like chieftain or king, some sort of nobility, get adopted into a noble family, and go from there.
Or wrench control from the former rulers if they're particularly bad, like Arion and Korax come to mind. But essentially become like the liberating force on their world and eventually their ruler as well. But,
some sort of rise to power like that. I was wondering with this, like it before this, did he have a name? Because it said like he was named Leman of the Russ. Like, was that just? And I wasn't sure if that was just him being officially brought into the Russ clan under Thengir, or if this was when he like actually got a name.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe he was just Leman of the Wild or something, and then eventually, like you said, earned his place in the clan of Russ, or he was just a nameless savage that they're just like, yeah, you can hang out with us, but
yeah, right. Thengir's like, hey, you asshole, go over there and fight those guys for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think he named himself, or did the group name him?
Super cringe if you name yourself. Who gives yourself?
Right.
You can't do that. I wonder too if his name has, like, obviously we know of the clan Russ is where the Russ comes from, but if Leman means anything. Like Lionel Johnson, for example, is like son of the forest. I wonder if Leman has any kind of meaning in the Fenrisian tongue. But, yeah. On that note of heroic rises, let's talk about his rise to power. The deeds of Leman Russ spread like wildfire across Fenris, carried on the wind and woven into the sagas of every tribe. His strength was spoken of in hushed reverence and bellowed in great halls. He was the man who could turn aside whole armies, sending them fleeing like wolves before the fire. It was said that he could tear the mightiest oaks from the frozen earth, snap their trunks across his back as one might break a twig. He hunted Fenrisian mammoths with his bare hands, wrestling them to the ground, and when the battle was done, he feasted upon their flesh, roasting them whole beneath a firelit sky. When old King Thangir's time came and he passed into legend, there was no question of who would take up his mantle. No warrior stood against Russ, for none would dare claim a throne that was already his by right of might and deed. So Leman of the Russ was crowned not in ceremony, but in the oaths of his people and the blood of his enemies. Under his rule, the scattered warbands of Fenris bent the knee, not in submission, but in loyalty. He was their king, their warlord, their god made flesh, and all who wished to endure in the brutal lands of ice and storm sought his wisdom, his wrath, and his strength. On Fenris, the weak perished and the strong thrived, and none were stronger than Russ. Yeah, again, it speaks to their culture of like they value action. You're not just king by bloodline or by, some divine right. You have to prove yourself and earn kingship and earn loyalty from the tribes.
How big is Russ relative to his brothers?
He's actually not that big. I think he's on the shorter side, actually.
Because that's
more stocky.
Yeah, because it's like, I know they're talking about how great he was a warrior, and yes, he's a great warrior. I'm not trying to dismiss that, but I'm like, he's one of the small Primarchs. It's just what I'm thinking reading this.
He made me think a lot of like Wolverine or Sabretooth, especially from like the X-Men.
That's literally what I was gonna say. Yeah, have you never heard Wolverine?
You just wanted to bring my namesake into this again.
Yeah,
exactly. There we go.
Why is it every Logan I meet is named after Wolverine?
I don't. So funny. When my mom was naming me, she was trying to find names that weren't tied to anything at all, and this was before the X-Men movies or anything came out. So she picked Logan because she had never heard of the comics or anything. And then I was, I don't know, 8 months old or something, and someone goes, "Oh, like the comic Wolverine," and she goes, "What is that? What does that even mean?"
Oh no!
So she had to go to a comic book store and find out who Wolverine was, and she was like, "Dang it!" She tried so hard.
Right, one of my neighbors did the opposite and specifically named his son after Logan from the X-Men.
I have a relative that was also named the same for the same reason. Yeah.
Oh, so you're asking about like if Leman means anything. So I don't know about in like Fenrisian, but in Swedish, like basically Norse, descendants of like Norse language, Leman means sweetheart, paramour, and loved one.
That was unexpected.
Did you see the definition right below that? No. It says an illicit lover, especially a mistress.
What was GW trying to say?
So, Leman is a mistress. Confirmed.
Confirmed. Man, tonight is full of lore drops. We're learning so much.
The secret Space Wolf lore. Get it here, folks.
Yeah.
But whose mistress is he?
Every other Primarch. He's every other Primarch. Bitch.
Right. Oh.
Yeah. They all just don't know about it.
There we go.
To your point about Leman Russ's size, to be fair, he does, Russ does actually get into quite a few scraps with other Primarchs, and he doesn't win a lot. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head if he wins any, other than the 2 unnamed Primarchs, which we don't totally know what went down with that. But like he's known for his ferocity, and like to be fair, like size isn't everything in a fight. It certainly is a factor, but people can, through skill or endurance and other factors, they can put up a fight regardless of their size. So size and strength isn't everything in a fight.
In regards to the other 2 legions, I don't know if this is factual, but I heard a rumor once that Russ is the warning, and then the Dark Angels are the one that actually dealt with the other two legions.
Yeah, there's nothing. That's the thing with the two unknown legions is like,
Mhm.
and obviously they tell conflicting stories and they try to leave it vague enough for you to kind of form your own opinions. I don't think we can really say much definitively. Even like when the first Space Wolf Horus Heresy books came out and the whole revelation that, you know, Russ was the one to quote unquote bring the other legions to heel. What was implied by that at the time, and then it kind of changed as other authors got involved later on in the Horus Heresy and they tried to pull back, it looked like, on, you know, did they even kill the other legions? Did they just have a, you know, talking down to, almost like the word bearers? Like, it's left intentionally vague.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and it feels like some of those authors had different ideas of what they wanted, which leads to some of these conflicting stories as well.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it does help with the mythos of like keeping it vague, but it definitely feels like some authors really wanted to push those space wolves are like the ultimate badasses that punish other legions, you know, the Emperor's executioners, and other authors wanted to like tone that down quite a bit. Is what it felt like to me.
Yeah, from
So-
what I've heard, it seems like a lot of the authors kind of like, and for all the different factions too, like they have their favorite pets and they'll kind of push their, you know, agendas in their books sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So you're telling me that multiple authors across hundreds of books cannot keep
Agree.
lore consistent? That's shocking.
Right. The chat is bad as Matt Ward and the Ultramarine circa 2008. That is before my my time for in the hobby.
Yeah. Matt Ward was infamous for Ultramarine like praise, I guess, and overhyping.
Ultramarine propaganda.
Oh,
Yeah.
he was the number one Smurf glazer.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. In fact, the GW glaze paint, he made those personally. So, yeah.
I am funny story. I found my local store. They randomly got shipped a bunch of the old glazes from GW just out of nowhere. It was just in a box with the rest of the stuff they ordered. They had a bunch that haven't been made forever, so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take those because I need them.
Nice.
Have you used them? Are they still good?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they're still good.
Huh.
They're still good. It's hard to get an effect similar to them, so I got like 8 of them. I was just so happy to have them.
You should
Oh,
sell
nice.
them for thousands of dollars on eBay.
I'm not
Great.
that guy. But maybe.
But
All right. Oh, hey, this is me, isn't it? The Wolf
I was
King.
about to say, you good, Logan?
I was dumb. I had the script down one tab, and I'm like, I thought I'm supposed to start. Oh, there it is. My bad. All right. The Wolf King. Thus did Russ ascend to the undisputed king of Fenris, the Wolf King. His word as unyielding as the ice-clad mountains, his sword arm mightier than the storms that howled across the land. No man nor beast could stand before him and hope to triumph. No warlord dared raise steel against his banner, for his armies swept across the land like the Fenrisian tide. Unstoppable and absolute. In his kingdom, man and wolf stood as kin, bound by the law of fang and claw. His halls thundered with the voices of warriors and the laughter of fair maidens. Maybe him because he's a mistress. And the sagas of his triumphs spread like wildfire, carried from tribe to tribe on the lips of bards and what is that? Scalds?
Skalds.
What is a
Yeah.
scald?
Basically,
They're
it's
like,
a Viking bard.
Yeah.
Never heard
Storytellers.
that.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day. All right. So great was his legend that even the distant heavens took notice. From the void came the mighty war fleets of the Emperor's Great Crusade, drawn to Fenris by tales of its Wolf King. The All-Father, the master of mankind, knew at once that this was no mere mortal, but one of the lost sons scattered by fate. And so the black-hulled leviathans of the Emperor darkened the skies, their great starboard prows turned towards the icy realm of Russ. Scarcely had a handful of winters passed since the Wolf King had united the warring tribes beneath his rule. Yet already the course of his saga was shifting, for the hour of reckoning had come, and with it, the hand of the All-Father stretched forth, seeking his wayward son. Every time I read Wayward Son, I just get the song in my head.
Right.
Just that one line, and then it stops.
And now every time I see anything about like the void ships, I can't help but think of like Christian's comment from before of they're just upside down boats.
Dude.
And I love it.
Literally, I was sitting in bed one night and I was just staring at it and I'm like, something about this looks very familiar, but I don't know what. Like, there's something about the prows of those ships that make me think of something. And I just literally flipped my phone upside down. I'm like, no way.
Son of a bitch.
Son of a bitch.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. All the Imperial ships are just upside down sail ships.
In the Purge in the comments says all father like Odin. I think that is exactly the kind of thing that they're trying to get across.
Yeah. If wolves are anything, they are not subtle in their themes.
No, wolves and GW are not subtle in their themes.
Yeah.
All right, so the coming of the Emperor. The Allfather came, clad in the humble guise of a wanderer, his form veiled in sorcery that bent the mind and clouded the senses. Yet even beneath his deception, his presence was a storm upon the great hall of Russ. The keenest of warriors and the mightiest of the great wolves of Fenris felt his coming and shrank from the weight of his majesty. But Russ, Wolf King and Warlord, did not kneel. No oath would he swear, no fealty would he give, save to one who could best him in battle. The Allfather knew this truth well, for he had forged warriors such as Russ with his own hand. In his heart he did not doubt, no man, no beast, no god of war could stand against his power. And yeah, with the like traveling as a wanderer is very much again harkening back to like Odin and Norse mythology and a lot of folklore and mythologies in general, but that idea of like the gods wandering to test the people that they're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also interesting. Also speaks to Russ's character is like, you know, some of the Primarchs, the minute they see the Emperor, they have that instant connection. We know who you are. We know what we are. Suddenly, there's this like clicking moment, and they like pledge loyalty, or they kneel, or they bow. But Russ is not like that. Russ is a fighter, and he does not simply just kneel. But yeah, he's one of the few Primarchs to actually challenge the Emperor. 3 challenges, to be precise. The Wanderer, strange and cloaked in mystery, strode toward the great wolf throne, its massive form looming over the hall like a mountain. He stood there, unbowed, his gaze locked with the mighty Russ, who ruled his warriors from the height of this throne. And then, with the thunderous voice of one who knew no fear, the stranger issued his challenge. The nature of the contest, he declared, would be for the Wolf King to decide. If Russ emerged victorious, the Wanderer asked nothing but a place beside him at the feast, to drink of Fenrisian mead in the Hall of Kings. But if he lost, the penalty would be servitude to the King of Wolves for a year. Russ, with eyes like ice, agreed, and the contest began. Russ, never one to turn from a challenge, tested the stranger's mettle first, with a contest of eating. The stranger, a beast of appetite, devoured plate after plate, outmatching the stoutest of Fenrisian warriors. Yet, when his gaze lifted from the feast, he saw that Russ had already consumed 3 great aurochs. The first challenge was his defeat, but the Wolf King only grinned, enjoying the sport. He then called for a drinking contest, a true trial of endurance. The Wanderer drank with all the fury of a Fenrisian beast, draining barrel after barrel of the strongest mead. But when he finally paused, he saw that the entire hall had been emptied, and Russ, not once faltering, had drunk the feast dry. Again, the Wanderer had failed. The light of anger sparked in the stranger's eye. Disappointed by his own progeny, he called Russ a glutton and a drunkard, a warrior who could do naught but feast and boast. Russ, unshaken, stood tall, and with a voice as deep as the howl of a storm, laid the final challenge. His court, grim and silent, watched as Russ drew his great sword, the blade gleaming in the firelight, and stepped onto the banquet table itself, a titan among men. With a roar of defiance, Russ swore he would defeat the Emperor in battle. The Wanderer, ever confident, cast aside his cloak. The hood fell from his face, and for the first time, all saw the true form of the Emperor. He was a towering titan of golden power, bathed in radiant light, his armor gleaming as the dawn itself. Sorry, I got a cough here. It's like The challenge was met with fury, and the clash that followed. The Emperor struck down Russ with a blow that could shatter mountains, his power glove crackling with ancient power. When Russ awoke, bloodied but unbowed, a broken fang grinning from his mouth, he rose to his knees and with a defiant smile swore his fealty to the Emperor. The Wolf King, humbled yet loyal, bent his knee to the master of mankind, swearing an oath forged in blood and battle, bound by myth and the eternal bond of father and son. Purge in the comments.
Yeah.
So Rust is Fat Thor from the Marvel movies. I wouldn't go that far.
No.
However, Thor is kind of misunderstood in kind of our modern context.
Yeah.
Thor was known to be a violent, petulant drunkard and feaster. He wasn't like the noble, heroic version that we tend to portray him as, like in Marvel. Yeah.
Yeah. He was also kind of like the god of like the common people. Like I remember reading that the symbol of Mjolnir in like Norse tradition was used for like binding contracts and stuff like that. A lot of like interpersonal things from that level.
Yeah, a vulgar god, let's say.
Also, yes, he liked to drink and fight a lot. And Jack says this is just some copy and paste in Norse mythology. I was going to get into that because the idea of like the three challenges is taken just straight from Norse mythology, where Thor actually gets challenged by to 3 contests by giants. They're a little bit different. There is a drinking contest, a foot race, I believe, and having to lift a cat, but it's not a cat.
While you were reading that, I looked up what an auroch was because I was just curious. Those things are bigger than cattle, and he ate 3 of them. That's insane.
It's that
Yeah, it's like eating
mythology.
like 3 water buffalo or whatever.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I thought, I don't know why. I'm like, oh, that's like a bird. He ate 3 turkeys. That's not that big. Oh my god.
No, sir. They are the king of cattle, the noble auroch.
I think aurochs actually comes from like Old English or something too.
The name itself, yeah, I wouldn't be.
Yeah, it was like I know like aurochs is. I know I've seen it like for like large breeds of oxen or something like that. I think.
Yeah. I wonder how they tasted. That's the saddest thing about all these extinct animals is you'll never know what they tasted. Fun fact, though, I don't know if it was mammoth meat or what meat that they thawed they found well preserved in the ice, and a bunch of scientists did make a meal out of it just to see how it tasted. So they
I remember reading that like you could spend a bunch of money and get like a mammoth steak.
Yeah, I don't know if they have quite that much substance in them to get a full steak out of, but they definitely made like a stew out of it, and ate like 1,000, if not million-year-old meat. So.
Right.
Do you think the mice that they have put mammoth fur on taste like mammoth, or do they taste like mice?
I haven't eaten either, so it's hard to say.
Chat, can we get some research on this? Who's big into eating rodents? Let me know. All right. Next up, the Discovery Order. Now I gotta go off. All right. Being the second Primarch discovered by the Emperor, Leman Russ and his 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, were shaped by their early integration into the Great Crusade. Unlike latter discovered brothers who had to prove themselves among an already established hierarchy, Russ quickly became one of the Emperor's most trusted warlords, setting a precedent for the Space Wolves as an elite vanguard force. This early discovery also meant Russ had fewer rivalries at the time, allowing his warrior culture to take root without as much political resistance. However, it also solidified his role as the Emperor's executioner, as he was available for some of the earliest compliance campaigns that were brutal. He was available for some of the earliest compliance campaigns where brutal, decisive action was necessary. This positioning within the Great Crusade would later feed into the Space Wolves' reputation as both enforcers and outcasts, respected for their strength, but often viewed as an uncontrollable force amongst their brother legions. I don't think
I
there
feel
are
like
any...
we've seen. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't think they're any more uncontrollable than the Night Lords.
But this was before the Night Lords, I think.
It has to be. Who was the
It was
first Primarch found?
Horus.
Horus? Oh,
yeah, Horus was the first. Yeah, so yeah.
I don't know why. I always think Horus was last for some reason.
No, Alfarius was last.
Okay.
Or Omegon, depending on who you believe.
But I feel like we've seen a lot of similarities to Khan. Like, and if you haven't listened to the Khan episodes, go back and listen to those, where he's like wise but furious, and a great leader and a great fighter. And this is almost seems like it's the opposite of what y'all had talked about during the Khan episodes, where because he was found so late, it was part of why he was kind of like on the a lesser known Primarch, I guess you could say. Whereas Russ being discovered sooner, is more integral to the history of the Great Crusade.
Yeah, that tracks. And also, I think there might be a question, other than Horus, of course, that like more loyalty. Russ is big into loyalty, and obviously Space Wolves are loyal to the Emperor. And I think some of the earlier discovered Primarchs tend to be more loyal. I could be wrong on that. I'm just trying to think of the order that they came in, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to stick with it until I get proven otherwise.
Well, no, that makes sense though, because the more time you have, the more dad time you have, the more you can forge those bonds.
Yes, you're less likely to kill your father if you spend more time with him.
Right. Go play Space Catch or whatever.
Unless you hate your father and you spend more time with him and eventually just go off. But that's a conversation you should have with your therapist and not with Warhammer.
Yeah, that's a conversation Horus should have had with his therapist.
Yeah.
So if this person is right, that I'm just trusting off the internet, it went Horus, Leman, the second Primarch, the one that's gone, Ferrus Manus, Fulgrim, Vulcan, Dorn, Gilliman, Magnus, Sanguinius, the Lion, Perturabo, Mortarion, Lorgar. So it seems like they are interspersed. And you were right. Alpha Legion was last.
Yeah, but it does tend toward more loyalists. There's the odd like Fulgrim. But it tends to be more loyal legions seem to be front-ended in that list.
A little bit, yeah.
Let's see. Top half, there are 1, 2, three. There's only 3 traitors.
Yeah. And even Fulgrim arguably was more corrupted by his weapon than by lack of loyalty too, right? Like he would have been a very loyal son.
I think I said it in the episode about him. I think he's the most tragic of the fallen Primarchs.
Yeah, certainly. I'm a big Fulgrim stan, if you haven't pieced that together. In the chat, Purge says he's like Perun in Slavic lore. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities in Slavic lore and Norse mythology. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, and I feel like Slavs will get angry. And if I say this, but
don't act Christian, all of our Slavic listeners.
I believe, or the reverse too, is maybe more Norse listeners too, but I believe Slavic mythology kind of evolved into a form. Like obviously these aren't one for one. A lot of people say the same thing about like the Greek pantheon and the Roman pantheon. They're not exactly one for one. There are a lot of mixes in history and like local mythologies that kind of mixed in with the Greek mythology to make the Roman pantheon. And I think there's a very similar thing that happens with the Slavic pantheon and Norse mythology, where they, there's a lot of similarities, but they're not quite a one for one. Like you couldn't say Perun is Thor, but there are lots of elements that are almost too similar to be coincidental, I would say. Even in like their symbolism and stuff, a lot of people are familiar with Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. It's almost like an upside down T looking sigil. And I believe Perun's axe has a very similar design.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's something that I remember. Like I've read about just religion in general, especially like polytheistic religions, were in general pretty open to pull in like deities from like their neighbors and like adopt them into their own, just for like, I guess, sort of like peace-ish.
Yeah, or conquest too. Oftentimes they'll adopt like a foreign god. That happens a lot too in Middle Eastern mythology as well. Like there's the same thing with like the Egyptian pantheon actually has a lot of ties with the Greek pantheon that I discovered recently, and the proto, like all the Babylonian and Persian mythology as well. So there's a lot of like cultural crossover. Yeah.
The Greeks also used to build empty temples to gods they weren't sure or didn't know about, just to cover their bases.
Yeah, the unknown gods. Yeah, it's if
right,
you want to go to heaven, you really gotta make sure, right?
Right.
It's like that one dude. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say it's that one dude in the
No,
Mummy who's just flipping through the religions, like trying to figure out which one is going to get him out of trouble.
Yeah, that was Benny. Yeah.
Benny.
All right. So the Legion, Sixth Legion of the Great Crusade, with a roar that shook the heavens, the Emperor took the Great Wolf King from his frozen home upon Fenris and began the training of the mighty Russ in the ways of the Imperium, a realm as vast as the stars themselves. The Primarch, swift and eager, learned the ways of war and the secrets of the Emperor's boundless domain with a ferocity that left even his master in awe. In mere weeks, the Emperor knew that what he had in the mighty Leman Russ, a warrior born to lead. When the time came, Russ stood before the warriors of the Sixth Legion, his own flesh and blood, created from his very DNA through the sacred rites of the gene seed. The wolves of Fenris had become more than mere men. They were the space wolves, the legion of Russ, the sons of the Wolf King, forged in the fires of battle. And with them, Russ strode forward into the Great Crusade, a warlord destined for legend. Clad in thrice-blessed power armor, his great sword cast aside for the legendary frostblade Mjolnir, its edge forged from the teeth of the great kraken Roman Jarl, a beast whose very roar could bring the mountains to their knees. Russ became a terror on the battlefield. It was said that Mjolnir could cleave the very mountains of Fenris themselves, and with this mighty blade in hand, Russ led his space wolves into every battle, a living storm of violence and fury. He stood at the vanguard, a berserker force of nature, and wherever he struck, all who dared stand against him were swept away. Leman Russ fought with the fury of the storm itself during the Great Crusade, his name etched into the annals of legend as both a cunning and fierce leader, though at times as untamed as the wild winds of his homeworld. His loyalty to the Emperor was absolute, though his spirit often burned with a violent unpredictability that earned both respect and fear. After the brutal Wheel of Fire campaign, where a third of his legion perished in a bloody clash with the orcs, Russ was honored by the Emperor with the Fang, his fortress home, and the Spear of Russ, a weapon as unyielding as the wolf that bore its name. Though the Emperor himself remained distant, Russ found counsel with Malcador, and the two forged a bond of trust and respect that would shape the Wolf King's path. Through the endless wars of the Great Crusade, the Space Wolves and their wild Fenrisian kin were always first into the fray. Russ, ever the proud Wolf King, led them with a heart that burned hotter than the sun. His enemies fell before him, their lives extinguished by the savage fury of his pack, their doom heralded by the endless howl of wolves at the moon. The name of Leman Russ, bloodied and unyielding, became a myth, a tale of savagery and glory that would echo through the stars for eternity. Damn.
Beautiful. Brings
Right.
a tear to your eye.
a tiny wolf tear. No, like that sounds really cool. Just like the description of the power armor, the weapons, and just I really appreciate him leading from the front. Like as just as a parent, and just back when I was working, just I always wanted to be the kind of person, and I always appreciated the kind of like managers and leaders that would never ask you to do anything they weren't doing themselves. And like that kind of leader, I'm assuming, especially in battle, having the kind of leader that's going to fight right beside you has got to be one of the most inspiring things you could ask for as a soldier.
Yeah, I think all the Primarchs exhibit that to some degree, more or less, but definitely Russ is like top tier for getting down and dirty, and like you said, not asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. Yeah, for all the criticisms we give the Space Wolves and Leman Russ, like he is a very cool Primarch. They are a cool legion. I'll reserve my other comments for the end of the episode, but credit is due for sure.
Maybe that's why everyone bullies him. He's just such a cool guy. You got to knock him down a peg.
Right, exactly. Otherwise, you get too proud, too arrogant.
Right, his huge, massive ego on that guy.
Yeah, and then you start a whole heresy because you thought you were the best.
The Russian heresy.
Yeah,
The
Russian
Leman heresy.
the
The
Leman heresy.
Yeah. That sounds like something to do with the Emperor's lover more than anything. A lover's quarrel.
Yeah, that's when your lover takes the throne from you.
Yeah. Jax in the chat says Russ did nothing wrong. I think most people would agree with that statement. Not as actually, that is not true. I retract my statement. Russ is the whole reason that Magnus did nothing wrong is a thing. Russ did something very wrong.
Russ did something wrong.
Yes.
I am with you on that.
Yeah.
And Purge says now we have the Spear of Odin. And you are 100% correct. And that's in one of the books they go into that even deeper.
Yeah. Gungnir. Odin's spear, and then his sword being Mjolnir versus Mjolnir.
Yeah.
Obviously, Thor's hammer versus a sword. Because GW is a little subtle. They don't think Russ should have wielded a hammer. Russ does seem to take on, like, he kind of flexes between Thor and Odin. I feel like later Russ starts to feel more like an Odin like character. And again, I'll kind of save my thoughts towards that at the end of the episode, but there are some things I wish, some directions I think I would like to see GW take the character of Leman Russ. But yeah,
I love the descriptions of like the gear, and we'll get into that later in the episode. One thing when I was looking is like the Frostblade Mjolnir. If anyone listening has played World of Warcraft, looked very similar to the Frostblade of the Lich King.
Yeah.
What? GW's never taken property from other things. Why would you?
I mean,
say that?
That's probably reversed in this case.
Why?
I don't know. I'd have to look when
that?
Space Wolves, when that came out versus when like Warcraft 3 came out.
I remember the Lich King coming out when I was a kid, and the Space Wolves were definitely around before that came out.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know if like in the lore if that blade was around or that artwork was around. But yes, because GW never does. They never take anything from anything.
Never, ever. How dare you?
All OC. OC all the way down.
Yeah, this is my OC. Please don't steal.
Yeah, original character. Sonichu.
The best character.
You should just combine two Primarchs together and then call it an original character and copyright
100%.
it.
There we go.
It has to be two different franchises though, so it has to be a Primarch and somebody else.
Okay,
Perfect.
fair. Maybe like a Marvel superhero or something.
Yeah, combine Russ with
Wolverine.
Thor. Totally an original. No, do Thor. It's a totally original character. It's even funnier.
Or do
I like Christian. No, I like your idea, Christian. Rustverine.
Rustverine. There you go. And Leman Thor. We get two for one. Yeah.
Two characters. Oh, shut it down. It's too good.
All right. The V1, that's 6. The 6th Legion and the Great Crusade. Only the Space Marines of the Legions of Astartes are courage and expertise perfectly blended. In other troops, they are present in varying degrees and proportions, and many scholars have debated their relative merits. For my own part, I come down on the side of courage, for courage can sometimes make a virtue of inexperience. I myself have commanded Imperial Guard troops whose prohibitor units have achieved great things because they were too inexperienced to realize that their goal was impossible. And that is a quote by Leman Russ on the military use of white shields. Yeah, just kind of speaking to, courage being a nice counterbalance to inexperience. Sometimes leads you to heroics, sometimes leads you to suicidal missions. 50-50. Leman Russ, Mediations on Imperial Command, Book 21. There are those who undervalue the penal battalions, but they should consider this. Should a man who has wronged the emperor be allowed to wrong him further? For each man executed is a man who can no longer serve, and to fail in service the emperor is the greatest of sins. And another quote by Leman Russ. Meditations on Imperial Command, book, oh man, these Roman numerals, 16? Do not underestimate the squats. They survived for millennia, cut off from the Imperium and assailed from all sides. Their determination and resilience is an example to all. Yeah, so we just have a bunch of Leman Russ quotes, which again goes back to the warrior philosopher, warrior poet. Like Russ is a deeper thinker than he lets on, for sure.
Yeah, like these
Yeah.
books are called meditations.
Yeah, which again, going back to the Roman theme, that's very much what's his name? Aurelian? No, Emperor Aurelian? No, that sounds wrong. He
It's.
wrote
I
meditation.
know who you're trying to say.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Anyways, the emperor that wrote the book
Yeah.
Meditate, Marcus Aurelius. How could I forget?
Okay.
There, yeah.
Yeah. So very much like Marcus Aurelius, who wrote his book of Meditations, a very deep thinker of an emperor. You know, once again, the Space Wolves prove themselves to be Roman and Viking, I guess.
Well,
But-
I mean, the Vikings did, like I think there were some like Norse mercenaries that worked for the Roman Empire. I
The
believe.
Byzantian, yeah.
I know there was the
Varangian.
Byzantium with the Varangian Guard. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, all these quotes are actually pretty cool. Like there is, I think, a truth to them. I do like that quote about, courage kind of making up for an experience. And then it almost comes off as pseudo-religious when he talks about like penal battalions. Like he's saying that they have virtue and merit in that, like, okay, they've already failed the emperor. Let's not waste their lives as failures. Let's let them kind of earn some honor back by being able to fight. For those who are unaware, penal battalions or penal legions are made up of prisoners who get pretty much conscripted into the Imperial Guard, often used for suicide missions or like very dangerous missions that you don't really want to sacrifice your good troops for, which is saying something when you're talking about Imperial Guard.
Right.
And then, and then just his commentary on the squats. Again, he's not like a blind, like boisterous, arrogant commander. He understands that his foes, they're dangerous. They do have merit. They're not, he's talking about the squats, that how resilient they are and how determined they are. So they're dangerous, and that you should learn from them as much as you could learn from a filthy Xenos. Although arguably squats are not exclusively Xenos, but
Yeah, and this one I took it as like talking about the squats as sort of like what they are now with the Votan, I guess demi-human race is how it might be considered. The way he talks about them being cut off from the Imperium as opposed to like an actual alien species.
Yeah, abhuman.
Abhuman, there we go.
Or subhuman, as the Imperium likes to.
Squats and ogres are the same thing. Is that what we just said?
Yeah.
Oh no, the Votan are superior humans, but we're not going to get into that right now.
Ooh, okay.
Save
Next
it for
time
the
on
abhuman
Lorehammer.
episode.
No.
Yeah.
Next time.
All right. I've got one more quote to continue. It says, "You strive for victory. That is obvious. What may be less obvious is the nature of victory. There are circumstances in which you can destroy the enemy utterly without loss to your own forces, and yet the victory may be his. In all situations, you must first decide on the nature of victory and then take steps to secure it. Avoid the instinct of fight first and think later." That is very deep thinker for someone that is just a rabid dog, according to most people.
Yeah.
But yeah, continuing on with his legion. The Space Wolves, led by their fierce Primarch Leman Russ, were the Emperor's blade in the Great Crusade, carving a path of blood and fire across the stars, a legion forged in the image of their leader, wild and relentless and loyal to the core. They struck fear into the hearts of the Emperor's enemies and respect in the hearts of his allies. Their brutal tactics were a reflection of their savage homeworld, Fenris, where only the strongest survived the unforgiving wilderness. Each warrior, a beast in battle, fought with a ferocity born of the cold, wolf-haunted lands of their birth, and they were as untamed as the howling winds tore across their icy shores. With their mighty war gear, such as the infamous Frostblade... oh, wait, that's Malnar, right? That's what we said that was?
Mjolnir.
Okay. I was like, oh, wait, no, that's not Mjolnir. What is that? What does this mean? Malnar and their wolf-helmed power armor. The Space Wolves were at the forefront of the Emperor's expansion, bringing fire and death to all who dared defy his rule. Their role in the Great Crusade was one of unflinching loyalty, but also unparalleled savagery. The Space Wolves were not ones to stand idly by. They sought the front lines, where they could unleash their brutal might upon the galaxy's most dangerous enemies. In battle, they were a force of nature, often fighting alongside other legions, but never shying from conflict, even with their own brothers. Their bond was strong, but their tempers fierce. Russ himself, a wolf among wolves, often found himself clashing with other Primarchs, driven by honor, loyalty, and a deep desire to carry out the Emperor's will with unyielding force. Despite the fiery nature and frequent conflict with others, the Space Wolves proved themselves indispensable for the Emperor's crusade, their bloodshed and loyalty carving their name into the annals of history, not just as conquerors, but as the Emperor's faithful sons, unstoppable in their quest to unite the galaxy under his rule. Now, this might go back to what we're talking about with different authors, but it's funny to read at the beginning of the section this really deep quote about, hey, you got to figure out what kind of victory you're going for. You need to think about it. You need to plan ahead. And then 3 paragraphs later, it's like, oh yeah, he'll just come unglued and go after his brothers when they get in his way. It's like, which is that? Is he aware of what he's doing? I mean, I guess he could be aware when he's calm, and then when he's unglued, he's unglued. I guess that could be a thing.
Yeah, when he's hangry, he just goes off the rails.
Oh, dude. I've got like 3 people in my life that get super hangry, so I just have snacks around me all the time now.
Yeah, that is me with my daughters especially. It's like, here, just eat some. Here's a piece of cheese and calm down.
Yeah, don't talk to me. Eat this in 5 minutes and then talk to me.
Yes. I do like that quote though from the beginning. I just because it helps to also like punctuate of how the kind of thinker that Russ can be, but also that you're thinking about what kind of victory do you want? Like, think about the objective first before you go into your strategy.
Yeah, 100%. Because that quote feels like it's coming from Gilliman or Dorn or Korax,
or
somebody
Johnson or something like that. Yeah,
someone who has to think about what they're about to do before they do it instead of the hammer of the Imperium.
I'm just imagining Russ in like the pre-battle planning stages, coming up with these different kinds of strategies. But then once actually the Space Wolf gets boots on the ground, they just forget it all and just go wreck everybody.
I picture him having intelligent conversations with his brothers, and then they go, "No, Russ, shut up. You're going to go right here. You're going to do whatever you want." Yeah, but I think we should. No, Russ, shut up. You're going to go right here, and you're going to charge through them. Yeah, but if we fight, no, Russ, shut up. You're going to go, and then just keep arguing with him to get him to be a hammer.
Oh, that is tragic. That if that unappreciated wisdom, here's these wonderful battle strategies or these wonderful thoughts from Russ, but no, you're just the tool that we're going to send there to crush these guys. Don't worry about it. You're thinking too much.
Maybe that fits with the persona we were giving him earlier. We were kind of calling him emo. He's like, you just don't understand.
Nobody gets me.
Nobody gets me. The Lorehammer podcast says it's like when you're super smart with your own thoughts when you're in the shower or on the toilet, but then you go into public and it happens to me all the time.
The definition of that sounded better in my head. Yeah.
Oh, dude, constantly.
Oh my god. All right, so a part of the Space Wolves is the Varigir Wolf Guard. The Varigir were chosen of Leman Russ, the fiercest warriors to walk in his shadow, handpicked from his great company to stand as his personal guard, his closest companions in both war and council. Each one was a legend in their own right, their names etched in the chronicles of battle, each a tale of ferocity and unyielding valor. Their deeds had earned them their place among the Wolf King's chosen, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of war, and no warrior could claim greater honor than to walk among them. More than any other sons of Russ, the Varigir were the wolves at his side, clad in the pelts of mighty beasts that marked their status as his protectors. To bear such a symbol was to forsake the pursuit of glory for oneself, to stand by while others sought the honor of battle, waiting for the moment when their lord's command would unleash them. When that fury was called forth, it descended upon the enemy like a storm, unstoppable and all-consuming. The charge of the Verrier was a thing of nightmares, a tidal wave of fur and steel where superhuman strength and ferocity of the wolf destroyed all in its path. Their blows struck like cannon fire, shattering bones and breaking wills before their blades even found their mark. As the Wolf King's honor guard, they fought with faith and loyalty, but each also sought to prove their superiority, claiming trophies from the fallen to honor their lord, with victories worthy of song, their names forever entwined with the blood-soaked stories of battle. Yeah, these guys seem really cool. It seems like a lot of it, like a lot, if not all of the Primarchs have their sort of like chosen elite protector guard. And the name even like a little bit reminded me kind of what Christian mentioned before of the Byzantines had Norse soldiers that were the Varangian Guard, like a mixture of the Varangian Guard and Valkyries kind of together in the way it talks about them charging into battle. Yeah, just sounds very cool.
Yeah. Fun fact about the Varangians. The reason Byzantine, Greco-Roman emperors would use Norse bodyguards, A, because of their fighting skills as mercenaries, and B, because they could no longer trust the Praetorian guards, who had a tendency to kill their own emperors, and take control of the empire. So kind of have to outsource the loyalty there.
Right. Did not work for Rome in the end very well, but that's another story.
That's another story for another time. Yeah. The name too also kind of reminds me of the Bogatyr from kind of Russian, not mythology, but like, legendary knights kind of feel. Yeah, they're kind of like Arthurian legend in Russian Slavic stories. Yeah, also what you're saying there, Fuzz, about all the Primarchs do have like a bodyguard unit. Typically they're in Terminator armor. I believe most of them are, if not all of them. And then you have a couple of exceptional groups, like I know the Iron Hands has a specialist unit, but they also have the Primarch. His name is escaping me. Not Iron Hands, sorry. Iron Warriors. No, sorry, Iron Warriors.
Perturabo.
Yeah, Perturabo has his like robots, as well as an honor guard unit, and Angron does not much care for his honor guard unit, but that's a story for another time.
Right.
The Iron Circle.
I don't think the Raven Guard have one either.
And that's what I was trying to think is like, do the Raven Guard even have? I believe they have a special unit, but I think they're more like stealth assassins rather than.
They have two. They have Dark Furies, which are better jump pack guys, and then they have a sniper unit that they use a lot. But they don't really. I think the Dark Furies would be the closest they have to an honor guard.
Yeah, and then there was another exception too that popped into my mind too while I was even saying that. Well, I mean, Ultramarines don't typically have honor guard in Cataphracti armor. There's the Vicatrix Guard that wear power armor.
Yeah.
With the axes and shield. So I retract that statement. But yes, all the Primarchs do have like a specialized pseudo bodyguard unit, more or less.
Yeah, like they're best of the best.
Yeah. Now, do they really need that bodyguard unit? I would argue probably not. Like if a Primarch's going to fight another Primarch, the bodyguards are not going to do much in that confrontation. I think it's more ceremonial and like honor based. However, like I said, Angron is exceptional in that he actively despised his bodyguard. So
yeah, and I wonder if it's also like a thing where like your honor guard helps to keep the rabble out of your way, so you're not getting distracted by other things, as well as maybe like they're to use like an MMO term, they're the gear check of your enemy. If you can make it past the honor guard, then you're worthy of fighting the Primarch.
yeah, that is I suppose. Although I wouldn't, like, if I set up a bodyguard, I would not want to fight the person that killed my bodyguard. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I'm not a Primarch. DPS. Liar says DPS check. Yeah.
DPS check.
Yeah.
But they're cool nonetheless. I like all the different honor guard units. I've always liked that facet of the legions. All right. On the note of Primarch on Primarch violence, let's talk about the lion and the wolf. In the fires of war, Russ stood unflinching beside his brothers. On the world of Dulan, he fought alongside the Dark Angels Legion, their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, at his side. But when the leader of the rebellious planet dared insult Russ's honor, the Wolf King sought to confront him alone, to claim the victory for himself. As the two legions stormed the rebels' fortress, Russ burst into the throne room only to find Lionel Johnson standing over the severed head of their foe. Wrathful, Russ demanded his due, only to be met by the arrogance of the lion. A battle erupted between the two, one that raged for days, until Russ, with his booming laugh, saw the childishness of their conflict. But the lion misread his mirth as mockery and struck Russ down while he laughed. A blow that would mark the beginning of a bitter rivalry between the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels that endures to this day, though now tempered by grudging respect and the occasional ceremonial duel between champions.
I remember that from the Dark Angels episode, how they get into beef with them frequently.
Yeah, it's almost like they're owed a challenge every time they cross paths. It's kind of a cool little tidbit of lore. There is some debate, especially around wolf stands and lion stands. A lot of people, claim Russ could have beaten Lionel Johnson, but it's only because he was laughing and Lionel Johnson was like dirty for catching him off guard and hitting him while he was not actively fighting. I don't really
like an unintentional cheap shot.
Yeah, exactly right. Like your opponent's not, their guard is down. Yeah, I don't really have a side in that conflict. I'm just bringing it to everyone's attention.
I was gonna say it sounds like both sides are just coping.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also the other side of it, is like maybe both Primarchs are kind of at fault, and maybe yes, Lionel Johnson did throw a cheap punch, and Russ shouldn't have started the fight that he couldn't win to begin with. Either way.
Why would the Dark Angels people be coping though? That's because they clearly won, but I guess maybe they think they were going to lose, and that's why they're coping about it.
That, or they're knights. They're like honorable, and like we don't have to resort to dirty tricks to win a fight. Like,
it wasn't really an honorable win. Yeah.
Imagine white knighting for a fictional character.
Imagine white knighting for a green knight.
Yeah.
I mean, man, have you been to some of these fandoms out on the internet? Like,
Legend says that if you are a Space Wolves player, you actually have to get into a fist fight with the Dark Angels player whenever you cross paths. So, I don't make the rules.
I've got like, it's funny you say one of the Space Wolves player that's at my local hobby store. He works there, but he's like, all right, here are the rules. You do this, and if you got a problem, we can go in the parking lot. I'm like, all right, let's go.
You're not even playing yet. You just get into the fight right away. You're like, I know I'm gonna have a problem with you.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. Love him.
I'm imagining like Games Workshop tournaments. They've got like a separate boxing ring in the corner for Space Wolves and Dark Angels players. Like before your match, you have to have like a 5-second fist fight or something. I don't know.
You have to do a duel of your choice, and the Space Wolf has to laugh and get a cheap shot.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Now we're going to go into the Night of the Wolf. All right. Following the savage and unforgiving Genia scouring, where an entire world was bathed in blood at the hands of the World Eaters, the Emperor himself struck down a decree. He commanded that the barbaric practice of the butcher's nails, the cursed cortical implants be ceased. In the wake of this horror, 2 Primarchs were sent to the World Eater's father, Angron, to convince him to end the ruthless procedure. The first came when Angron had only just joined his legion, torn from Nuceria against his will. The second would come a century later, though by then the bloodshed had already taken root and nothing could stop the unfolding chaos. The Night of the Wolf is an event long whispered among the stars, a tale wrapped in blood and fury. It came after the Genia scouring, after the Imperial compliance had been wrought through violence and terror. The Emperor had charged Leman Russ, his mighty Wolf King, to lead his Space Wolves to the barren wasteland of... Oh, man, I keep reading this like it's the first time I've ever seen it, and I feel stupid. Gehenna to the world eaters to bring the world eaters to heel. The two legions met on the fields of Malkoya, a land scarred by the slaughter of the Genian people. The world eaters, battered and broken from their brutal campaign, stood in ragged lines before the assembled space wolves. And there they stood, Angron, the furious and broken son of a planet that had never known mercy, his skin painted with the fresh blood, wounds still open from the horrors of his war, and Leman Russ, replenished in his battle plate, shining like the storm-ridden skies of Fenris, a king among wolves. Angron, with his axe Widowmaker, his first weapon, and a blade forged from fire and fury, stood defiant. Russ, armed with Krakenmaw, his great chain blade, its teeth sharpened from the fangs of the sea devils of Fenris, stood unyielding. Angron, consumed by his hatred, refused to bend to his brother's authority. He wanted Russ to leave to avoid a reckoning that would tear them both apart. But Russ, fierce and untamed, refused to yield. He spoke the will of the Emperor. The butcher's nails must end. The massacres that had marred humanity's worlds, the slaughter that had begun on Gehenna, must stop. The World Eaters, led by Angron, would submit to the Space Wolves, and together they would make their way back to Terra. Only then would the Emperor's forces begin the great work of purging the butcher's nails from the minds of the World Eaters. But Angron's was unrelenting in his defiance, unwilling to accept the Emperor's decree. No one could say who struck first. In the years that followed, both legions would claim that the blow was from the other. Without a word from their Primarchs, the Space Wolves and the World Eaters clashed in a storm of bloodshed. The Night of the Wolf would be remembered as a moment of mythic fury. Through the Imperial records would cloak it in silence, calling it the Gehenna Scouring, erasing the truth of the battle between the Wolves and the World Eaters. It was a battle neither side would claim as a victory, yet neither could walk away with their heads held high. Both legions, bloodied and broken, would hold on to the tale as a mark of pride and a secret shame. The World Eaters never returned to Terra, and Angron, though beaten, would never halt the implantation of his sons. In the end, the Emperor's will was ignored, and the battle left its mark on both the World Eaters and the Space Wolves, shaping them into something far darker and more mythic than before. That's a super cool interaction between the two most violent Primarchs.
Right.
It is, but I do have my qualms with this. So this happens during the Great Crusade before, of course, like Horus turns.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read those earlier books, they put such an emphasis on when the first Space Marines started killing other Space Marines being such a shocking, unthinkable event. Like people just couldn't even comprehend that a Space Marine or Primarch would even go rogue to begin with, and B, that they would go so far as to kill each other. It was just so horrifying a thought. But then that's kind of downplayed when we've seen it happen before, which kind of devalues that level of a shock when you first introduced in the Horus Heresy on Marine violence. That's always been kind of my problem with it. And the other thing, of course, this is another one of those cope situations. You have the Dark Angels and the Space Wolves who argue over that one fight, and then this is same with the World Eaters and Space Wolf stands, who are often at odds about no, my Primarch's still stronger than your Primarch. My dad could beat up your dad, kind of thing.
Right.
Where a lot of people claim the Wolves kind of outmatched Angron, and Angron would still be killed by the army of the Wolves, right? Like it shows Angron being unable to control himself, which was really Leman Russ' goal all along. And then the reverse of Angron still beat the piss out of Leman Russ, right? So yeah, it's also one of those fights that causes the fan base to fracture a little bit on people picking their side, and really it just seems like a big cope fest on both sides every time this happens.
Yeah. People taking the hobby too seriously.
Dude, people like that's why I like the meme culture of the hobby more, because they can have those arguments and discussion. Everybody's like, haha, this is funny. But then occasionally you get the people that are like super invested, like, no, I'm serious. I will fight you over this. It's like, dude, it's calm down.
Yeah.
Well, like I said,
This
I'm
one-
in favor of the fights. So, you know, just get all your World Eaters players now whenever they encounter a Space Wolf player and get in the ring.
Yeah, I want
just a big three-way fight between the Dark Angels players,
Yeah.
the Space Wolves players, the World Eaters players.
Yeah.
rock paper scissors.
so-
That'd be funny.
Right. So this one it was that Angron beat Russ, but the Space Wolves beat the World Eaters, correct?
Yeah, more or less, you could think of it that way. Like the Space Wolves position themselves that theoretically, if the fight would go to the death, that Angron might kill Leman Russ or injure him severely, and then the rest of the wolves would descend on Angron and kill him.
Mm-hmm.
If that were even possible. I like to think it's possible, but regardless, you also kind of have both Angron and Leman Russ, unfortunately, also both kind of suffer from the Worf effect, because they are the two Primarchs that everyone kind of thinks should be vicious berserkers and should be able to take down other Primarchs. But then constantly they get put in these matchups, and then obviously GW can't kill off random Primarchs because they don't have enough of them, and it would mess with the story. So they always kind of like end up getting Worfed a lot, unfortunately, which kind of devalues all their characters, really. When your champion starts losing all these battles but never really being defeated, it gets into some messy storytelling, is how I like to put it. But
yeah, I was thinking the same thing when I was reading the notes. So after that, we come to the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea was a momentous gathering held in the year 239 M30, summoned by the Emperor of Mankind to address the growing concerns surrounding the use of psychic powers among the Space Marine legions. At the heart of the council lay the Emperor's desire to curb the unchecked influence of sorcery and the burgeoning threat of chaos within his armies. The gathering brought together the Primarchs and their commanders, along with high-ranking members of the Adeptus Astartes, to deliberate on whether the use of psychic power should be fully sanctioned or strictly forbidden within the legions. The Emperor, ever cautious of the perils of the warp, sought a unified stance on the issue to protect his dream of a perfect Imperium. Leman Russ, ever the loyal son of the Emperor, staunchly opposed the use of psychic powers. A warrior who relied solely on the strength and skill in battle, Russ viewed the use of sorcery as an abomination and a sign of weakness. He saw the Psykers as dishonorable and beneath the purity of the Astartes, who were born to fight with their hands and weapons, not to wield the unfathomable forces of the warp. Russ, like his brothers Fulgrim and Vulcan, was deeply distrustful of the psychic gifts, believing that their potential for corruption would taint the purity of the Emperor's vision. To him, it was clear that the use of such power was a step toward damnation, and he believed that the Astartes should remain free of such burdens. The outcome of the Council of Nicaea was a ban of the use of psychic powers by the Space Marine legions. While many Primarchs, including Russ, hailed this decision as a victory for the integrity of the Emperor's vision, it had far-reaching consequences. For Russ and his Space Wolves, the decision was a reaffirmation of their already strict code of honor and their rejection of sorcery. However, the consequences were dire. The ban on psychic powers led to the eventual split within the legions, particularly with the Thousand Sons, whose psychers were deeply entrenched in their battle doctrines. Russ's unyielding stance in the council would ultimately contribute to the growing tensions between his brothers, setting the stage for the tragic events of the Horus Heresy, where brother would turn against brother and the loyalty of the Space Wolves would be tested like never before. So yeah, Russ, I know that's, again, the sort of like meme culture on the Space Wolves. Russ hates Psykers and totally does not have any Psykers anywhere in his legion.
I had a friend who used to argue with me for a year. He absolutely refused to acknowledge that rune priests were Psykers.
Is frankly fitting if he's a Space Wolf player.
True.
I'm not surprised. Yeah. Obviously, huge contradictions that we'll get into in a second when I do get into but if you take it at face value, yes, Russ and the Space Wolves are very anti-Psyker, very distrustful of magic and anything tainted by the warp, allegedly. that also has foundations in like, you know, distrust of magic that you find in a lot of cultures. And I'm thinking in this case specifically of Conan the Barbarian. There's this deep distrust of magic and sorcery. Yeah.
Yeah, the Lorehammer podcast in the chat says, do you think this is why they became known as the Executioners, or like the Legion that keeps the others in check, not the second and the 11th? So like the idea being that one of the theories that the Space Wolves, you know, were the ones that killed the second and the 11th Primarch and their legions, or at least some of them. But I think it is a little bit of this, but also, you know, they were referred to as the Legion that like had to, you know, bring the other ones to heal. They were the Vanguard Legion. They would, like, during the Great Crusade, they would, you know, kind of the original Legion that would have those brutal victories, bringing worlds into compliance with the Imperium. So I think that's where more like the Executioners comes into play, like the Emperor's Executioners.
Yeah, and Sam too with that, like, you know, whether or not you take executioner at face value of like actually killing, but like executing the Emperor's orders. They are the enactors of the Emperor's commands. And this comment is in reference to the Knight of the Wolf, or what is it, the Wolf Knight?
Yeah, the Knight of the
Wolf. Something Wolf and Knight. Yeah, and then Liar 2 in the chat says Angron won because he's too dumb to care. Arguably a victory, yes. Yeah. But yeah, I'll reserve my thoughts on the whole Emperor's Executioners piece too towards the end. But
yes, so much you're teasing for the end. I'm so excited.
And you know what? I'm gonna forget most of these points when we get there. So
dude, honestly, like as someone, you know, like usually in the chat and watching and having thoughts, like I've been trying to like write down these things, like jot down notes to remember for like call-in sections and stuff. I get it.
Yeah, and if anyone does call in tonight, call me on one of these things that I said I'll get into later if I don't get into it, because there's a good chance. There's a lot going on in this, rattling around in this brain. So
Christian's just clickbaiting the whole audience.
Yeah, there was nothing there to begin with. I'm just leading you on so you stick around to the end of the episode. Perfect. All right, back to magic. Let's get into the Rune Priests. The Rune Priests of the Space Wolves, known as the Casters of Runes in the days of the Horus Heresy, are warriors of untamed power. These combatant shamans call upon the spirits of Fenris. Their battle cry thundered with the might of the storms and the ancient fury of their homeworld. The wolves of their pack follow their lead, for these warriors are more than psychers. They are the keepers of the pack's deepest secrets, guarding the chapter's lore, not in ink, but in the living blood of saga and song. Little known fact, here at Lorehammer, we do like to write our notes in blood as well to keep in that tradition, as we are the lore keepers as well. In truth, rune priests are not mere wielders of psychic force. Their power is born from the totems and runes of their ancestors, etched into their armor as the spirits of Fenris channel through them. They do not bow to the warp as their foes do. These traditions stretch back to the shamanic tribes of Fenris, untouched by time, passed down from first warriors who walked the frost-kissed plains of their world. The rune priests do not see themselves as psychers, nor would they dare to call their powers that. They are the sons of Fenris, and it is the primal spirit of the world that guides them, not the malicious whispers of the warp. Leman Russ, their king and Primarch, shared this view when the Emperor sought to stamp out the power of psychers during the Great Crusade. It was Russ who argued that the disbanding of the Librarius within all legions. The wolves would not suffer the touch of the warp. They would stand strong in the fires of battle, driven only by their might and the spirit of the spirits that walked with them. Yet, when the Emperor decreed that the Council of Nicaea that psychers would be outlawed, the rune priests of the wolves stood steadfast. They insisted that their powers came not from the warp, but from the wild, untamed spirits of Fenris itself, fierce and unyielding. Like the storm seers of the White Scars, they channeled the natural fury of their world, shielded from the dark whispers that might otherwise seek to consume them. In the halls of their fortress, the rune priests recite their chapter sagas, each story a sacred thread woven in the tapestry of their history. Their learning is not written, but memorized in long tales of valor and sacrifice. A young rune priest begins as a skald, apprenticed to one of the great companies, and with each passing great year, he travels to another, learning and memorizing the ancient stories of the Space Wolves, until he can pass them on to the next generation. These tales are spoken at feasts during sacred festivals of the wolf time, when the pack gathers to celebrate the founding of their chapter. In this great festival, contests of storytelling and rune duels are held to determine the next high rune priest. This honored warrior is the leader of all rune priests, and their wisdom guides the great wolf in all the matters of lore and battle. Each company of the Space Wolves is led by a rune priest, one of these fierce warriors who calls down the storms of Fenris and reads the runes to guide his brethren. The weapons of the rune priests are forged with the power of their ancestors. Their runic blades crackle with psychic energy, and their storms rage across the battlefield, heralding the approach of their mighty packs. With these weapons, they carve the future from the very bones of the world, casting runes to predict the flow of battle and the tides of war. Many rune priests are bound to the ravens of Fenris, known as the choosers of the slain, their eyes seeing through the raven's sight, their voices carried by the wings of the storm. These creatures are the scouts and messengers, ever watching, ever waiting for the call of battle. The rune priests are the heart of the Space Wolves, warriors, legends of legend, born of fire and storm. They are the living link between past and the future, bound to their world, their chapter, and their Primarch by the unbreakable chain of duty and honor. Yeah, so again, getting into the whole, duality, again, is a big theme of the Space Wolves. So this idea that, oh, we use psychers, but we also hate psychers, and our psychers aren't really psychers. I do like internal contradictions if they're part of the story. Like, so I don't totally hate this idea. I do think it adds an interesting spin. But do I believe it? I don't know, man. I don't. I think it sounds again like cope, warp cope, and that the wolves are somehow obviously channeling the warp. Now, I don't know if someone in a chat mentioned this in a previous episode, or if this was my own thought, but I will allow for, similar to with the White Scars, how they also channel their own world spirit, that this concept could exist and it could shield them from the negative sides of the warp. So
I think I brought that up during White Scars.
Okay, yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, this sounds familiar.
Yeah, I remember that from the White Scars episode. So I could theoretically mentally allow that to also be the case. But like I said, like Space Wolves are built on these contradictory ideas, and I think that plays nicely in with that as well.
Yeah. I had similar thoughts like that. They are psychers, but I do think that there is some sort of like world spirit aspect to it as well, with either way, shielding them from like the warp energy being as dangerous as it would be normally, and also with like Frecky and Gary, like maybe they are actually the living avatars of the world. Like that's what's keeping them alive, is like the world is giving them that energy.
Yeah, I like to think that their psychic energy almost feeds in, almost like a totem, and feeds into the warp and kind of protects them.
I like that.
And the same idea of like your belief in the Emperor, even if you're a psyker, protects you from like the negative aspects of the warp, right? By that same token, they just shift that belief from an Emperor to their worlds, and that serves a function as like a conduit to protect them from negative warp energy. The Lorehammer podcast in the comments says, would Exodites have a similar world spirit idea? Yeah, I think that tracks too. So yeah, world spirits.
I don't know much about Exodites, so I don't know.
Yeah, I actually just wrote up the lore posts about this not that long ago, about like world spirits and certain Eldar. I forget what they're called, but they kind of like speak to the world spirits of planets, the whole hippie nature connection. And like planets have like an internal soul, I guess, that can get angry and go off, and these Eldar can like speak to these world spirits and soothe them or whatever. But
nice.
Yeah.
All right. With that, the onset of the heresy. Leman Russ's conquests. Get out of my way. There was a name in the way. That was weird. All right. Leman Russ's conquests in the name of the Emperor surged like a storm across the stars, his mighty space wolves carving a path of glory through the galaxy's furthest corners. Worlds fell beneath the hammer of his warriors, each new conquest adding another stone to the foundation of the Imperium. As the Great Crusade unfolded, Russ and his brothers, the 20 mighty Primarchs, were united with their legions, leading their sons to the stars in a brotherhood that seemed unbreakable. But the light of the Emperor's vision, bright as it was, began to dim. A betrayal most foul and dark beyond imagining, shattered the golden age. Horus, once the Emperor's favored son, was seduced by the ruinous powers, his ambition consuming him as he turned his back on the Emperor to claim the throne for himself. What followed was a cataclysmic schism known as the Horus Heresy, a war that would scar the galaxy for all eternity. The galaxy trembled as Horus's rebellion tore the Imperium apart. Brother against brother, Primarch against Primarch, 9 legions, bound by deceit, treachery, and corruption, followed the path of the War Master into damnation. Yet, amidst the swirling storm of betrayal, Russ remained steadfast. His loyalty was unshakable. His oath sworn to the Emperor from the very first meeting, the Space Wolves stood firm, an unyielding force of loyalty and fury, refusing to waver in the face of darkness. They fought with the ferocity of the wolf at the Emperor's side, partaking in the legendary battles of the heresy, their deeds etched into the annals of myth. Though they were not present for the final shattering days of the Battle of Terra, the Space Wolves had already forged their fate in the fires of the Horus Heresy, their blood feud with the Thousand Sons beginning in the earliest days of the rebellion, and an eternal mark of vengeance that would echo throughout the ages. Despite being considered ill-tempered and argumentative, Russ was held in great esteem by his brother, Rabute Gilliman, who privately referred to him, along with Rogaldorn, Sanguinius, and Ferris Manus, as the Dauntless Few, the 4 Primarchs who could be counted on to carry out their father's designs. Gilliman once said that he could win any war outright if he had one of those 4 and his legion alongside the Ultramarines. Such was Russ's deadly abilities and loyalty to the Emperor. Sorry, I can't read. Such was Russ's deadly ability and loyalty to the Emperor appointed to him as the unofficial executioner and enforcer. It was suggested that he had something to do with the fates of the lost Primarchs. Yeah, I remember reading various books, and I can't remember which ones, but there are a handful where they say, okay, Russ is out here in space right now, and we need to make sure he stays out there because he will ruin whatever we're trying to do with this plan right now.
So kind of like we were talking, like, you know, he might know the battle plan, but when he actually gets on the ground, he's just going to go off the rails and shit's going to hit the fan.
Yeah, I meant the traitors didn't want Russ to get there because they knew they were going to lose. Yeah, the loyalists were typical because they're
also good.
Yeah, there's a couple books where like Russ is losing a war and Corax goes to save him, big flex. But he was such a problem that multiple legions were trying to keep him away and keep Russ out of the game, just with how strong his legion was.
Nice.
And, you know, you can't... I think all the Primarchs had a little bit of a, hey, come join us. But I don't think they ever really tried that with Russ because they knew it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, it wasn't going to happen
because of his loyalty.
Yeah.
Like the way they describe like his loyalty reminds me of the way I've always read about like Rogaldorn's just like unflinching, unyielding loyalty to the Emperor.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's just, I mean, all the loyalists were clearly loyal, but Russ is unshakable. Dorn, very stoic and also unshakable.
Mm-hmm.
I vaguely, Lyra in the chat says Horus specifically said he doesn't want Russ to find out. Yeah, and I if I'm remembering this correctly, it's been a while since I read the Horus Heresy books, but I do think part of the fall of Prospero was okay with Horus in that it distracted the wolves and kept them away as well. I could be wrong on that, but I vaguely remember an aspect to that plan where even if Magnus is getting his ass kicked, it keeps the wolves occupied and away from other plans that he's trying to do. So,
and the Thousand Sons weren't that big, right?
like in numbers?
Yeah, numbers. Because strategically, if you're going to sacrifice a small legion to keep a horrifying monster out of your way, that would be a good one to do it with.
I would say it seemed like they treated the Space Wolves very much like a cost-benefit analysis of what are we going to spend to keep them over here.
Yeah.
Which again speaks to the Legion and their reputation, right? Like,
absolutely.
They are very much a threat.
All right, so going on, the personality. Another quote from Leman Russ: "Beat your thoughts to the mold of your will." Leman Russ is a warrior born of fire and ice. His personality is untamed and savage as the world of Fenris that forged him. His heart is bound by loyalty and honor, yet tempered with the fierce bloodlust of a hunter. Russ exudes a primal strength, never hesitating to charge headfirst into battle, driven by the instinct to conquer and defend. His spirit is raw, unrefined, and fiery, often quick to anger, but his wrath is tempered by an unshakable sense of duty to his brothers and his legion. Though his temper is infamous, those who gain his trust see the depths of his loyalty, as he would give his life for his pack without hesitation. He is a leader whose voice is both thunderous and inspiring, a true king among his warriors, yet beneath that kingly exterior is a brother who shares in both their glory and their pain. Despite his ferocity, Russ also has a sharp wit and a sense of humor born from the rough camaraderies of the Space Wolves. He is not one to mince words or follow strict protocols that others might deem proper, instead preferring to act on instinct and the bonds of brotherhood. While he can be headstrong and reckless, his actions are always guided by a fierce sense of right and wrong, and he is steadfast in his loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium, even if he does not always agree with their methods. His pride is as much a part of him as his power, but it is his pride rooted in the strength of his legion and the unbreakable bond between himself and his warriors. Russ is a figure of myth, his personality a volatile mixture of wisdom, barbarism, and honor, a true wolf at heart. Yeah, I like that quote, just his idea of like whatever thoughts you're having in your brain, whether they be, positive, negative, whatever, use your will to overcome that and do what needs to be done. It's at least that's how I take that kind of statement from him.
Yeah, I read it the same way, which is a good thought, especially someone who is known to be driven by wild instincts to make an effort of self-control, I guess, in a simpler term, but like a disciplined self-control, like when you don't feel like going to the gym and you like force yourself to go to the gym, like, yeah.
Never happened in my life.
Never been to the gym in your life?
Never. Yeah. No, there days. It's like I've never been like, I should just go. Nope, I'm not. If I'm like, I'm not going, I'm not going.
You've determined in your mind. Yeah.
Yep. I've decided when I woke up, the day is already ruined.
Yeah. And I like it talking about his sense of humor as well. I feel like Russ would have a lot of like gallows humor, and also the kind of person who, I'm sure we all have this where like, we are just absolutely relentless in how we joke and make fun of our friends, and it's all, it's all part of that humor. But as soon as somebody who's not part of that group makes fun of our friends or our family, it is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
Can't just turn around like, I don't remember asking you. Someone's making fun of your friend.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that's also like none of the other Primarchs really have, I guess, humor as a dominant character trait. There's likable Primarchs, there's angry Primarchs, there's stoic Primarchs, but I can't think of anyone else that's really considered like, a good meaning. Maybe Vulcan, but even then he's just more friendly than he is like funny. But
Vulcan is consistently described as a gentle giant to me, and I have no clue how accurate that is.
It is very accurate if you consider torching your enemies and their fire as being gentle. But
I mean, you're cleansing their sins. I don't see how that's a problem.
Right.
Yeah, it's
be like Yeah, like with Russ, if all the times he's been through this episode been described as like laughing during battle, ending, and he lost to the Emperor and he woke up from unconsciousness just smiling was the first thing that he did.
Yeah, like it again. I can't see any other Primarch responding like that to the Emperor or to losing a fight even. The Lorehammer podcast says Can was a laughing guy too. Yeah, and I guess that goes back to the similarities between Can and Russ. Deeper thinkers, savage exteriors, enjoying humor. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The White Scars ride bikes and the Space Wolves ride wolves. They all like to go fast in their own special ways.
Yes. Perfect synchronicity. All right. Let's talk about Leman Russ's appearance. Leman Russ, the Wolf King, stands as a towering figure, a beast of battle forged in the very fires of Fenris. His presence is an imposing force, a warrior whose power is matched only by the ferocity in his eyes. His features are rugged, a face carved by the harsh winds of his homeworld, with a wild mane of golden hair and a beard that echoes the savagery of the wolves he commands. His eyes are sharp and blue as the glaciers of Fenris gleam with the untamed spirit of the people, and his gaze can strike fear into even the most stalwart of foes. His countenance is often lit by a broad, toothy grin, though it is the grin of a hunter about to tear into the heart of his prey. He's a living legend with a raw power and presence that could command armies or lead a lone wolf to victory. His frame, broad and muscular, is a testament to the relentless strength of his kind, a being whose very essence is entwined with the cold and unforgiving world that he hails from. Again, he's on the shorter end of the Primarchs, but even the shortest Primarch is still a towering giant.
It's still a Primarch.
Yeah. Don't get confused. Even the least of the even freaking word bearers. What's his name?
Lorgar.
Lorgar would like body any human at any sport or physical activity, like easy.
Yeah, your tiny Primarch is like 7 feet tall, 300 pounds or whatever. I don't know. Like,
can still bench press a Titan. So
yeah,
don't get confused here. Clad in the mighty armor of Elavagar, Leman Russ's warplate is a fearsome sight to behold. An artifact of death and ancient craft, the suit is a gleaming shell of artificer armor, a second skin that seems to hum with the very cold of Fenris itself. Frost patterns run along the surface like the icy winds that howl through the frozen tundras of his homeland. And at its heart, strange exothermic field generators give off a lethal aura of frigid death. His heraldry is the unmistakable symbol of the Space Wolves, a snarling wolf's head, teeth bared in eternal fury. His weapons are equally legendary. Mjolnir, the sword of blood and night with the darkening blade, the axe of Hellwinter, made from the teeth of the mighty Kraken, and the Scorn Spitter, the weaponry forged by Vulcan to be worthy of Russ's grip. Together, his armor, weaponry, and heraldry form the essence of the Wolf King, unstoppable, lethal, and proud, a living embodiment of the ferocity of the Space Wolves and the power of the homeworld. Pretty cool. His armor looks very much like Mark II, Mark III power armor, but just upscaled to Primarch size.
okay.
I'm trying to think of his Forge World model.
It looks like that. It's the I can't share my screen with you, but it's got that Mark II-ish thing because it's kind of very Nordic, like we've been talking about, because all the plates are stripped like that, and then instead of the round rivets, he's got diamond rivets sticking out all over it.
Yeah, like the more spiky type rivets.
Yeah, and then the exhaust things on his power pack, instead of being the normal, it's 2 wolf heads sticking out of the sides.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking at a picture. It's cool too that his armor exudes this like cold and icy cold around him all the time. That's a cool feature too. It's unique to him. I always thought of Leman Russ as being a redhead, to be honest, before the official pictures and descriptions came out.
Yeah. Well, I think like in Norse mythology, I think Thor is described as having red hair as opposed to like Marvel Thor, which is Yeah,
and literally the name Russ, I think, it means like red-haired.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of misleading things, GW. I don't know why you're lying to us, but
they're gaslighting you.
Yeah, constantly.
Right.
That's not canon, and it never was. What are you talking about?
There's always been female custodes. Yeah.
that was the funniest because I don't like the custodes just in general. So seeing all the custodes fanboys be angry made me so happy because I'm like, good, you guys deserve it.
Oh my gosh, we're not getting into this right now.
Oh, dude,
I'll
I
flip it
don't
to-
even care. I'm just mad.
That's-
I'm just glad they were mad. That's all I cared about.
He just got kicked.
Oh no.
Ah, hilarious. Fate itself has spoken. He's gone.
Oh, but yeah, like the description of his armor, I do think is very cool. I was looking at the Forge World model a little bit too, and the way like the armor is patterned, also almost looks like leather armor in a way, or like padded armor in a way. I don't know, like something about like the way his bracers and like the tops of his greaves look a little bit. It's a very interesting model, though. I like it.
Yeah, I have a third party. One thing I've always hated about the Primarchs model wise is none of them have helmets. And I got a really sick third party Leman Russ model that comes with a really cool Viking helmet.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I don't know if they make them anymore, but I
Fulgrim comes with a helmet. 40k Fulgrim, let's go.
He does. Interesting. That's a new feature. But
Send me a picture of that helmet you've got for Russ.
I'll have to dig it. Yeah. I'll have to dig it up, but
okay,
yeah, definitely.
If you
cool. Yeah.
Since we're speaking about his armor, I'll go into a little more detail about his armor. So the warplate of Leman Russ is a relic forged in the fires of myth, a suit of artificer armor whose origins are shrouded in the blood-soaked mists of the early days of the 4th or 6th Legion, Its creation is bound to the savage age of warfare, a time when the Primarch wrested control of his legion from chaos and bloodshed. In the annals of the Space Wolves, its true history is veiled in dark allegories and cryptic symbols, a legend that none but the wolves themselves dare speak. This warplate is imbued with exothermic fuel generators, its design a thing of terror unknown to the Imperium's finest artificers. When activated, it bleeds heat and energy, creating an aura of death and cold that wraps around Russ like the biting winds of Fenris. To the people of his homeworld, it is known as Elavangar, the Killer Frost, a wave of deadly chill that sweeps all before it, heralding the Wolf King's unstoppable wrath. That's super cool. And then another piece of his war gear, the Kraken Maw. Kraken Maw was originally the primary weapon of Leman Russ, a massive and ornate frostblade renowned for its brutal power. Its teeth forged from the remains of a Fenrisian kraken, giving the weapon an otherworldly and fearsome appearance. As a symbol of Russ's ferocity and dominance in battle, the Kraken Maw was more than just a weapon. It was a part of the Primarch's very identity. However, during the Night of the Wolf, Angron shattered Kraken Maw, leaving the weapon broken and its legacy stained by the horrors of the heresy. In the aftermath, Leman Russ replaced Kraken Maw with his legendary Frostblade Mjolnir, but the legend of the Kraken Maw continued to haunt his legacy. Forever a reminder of the brutal conflicts that define the Primarch's path.
Yeah, I think Kraken Maw was like a chain blade where like the chainsaw teeth were like the Kraken teeth, and that just seems incredibly cool.
That's like the most base chainsword. Interesting. I'm looking at pictures of earlier Russ art, and some of it was kind of like a sword, but towards the bottom is where it had all the jagged edges instead of teeth all the way around it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that Mornfang looking sword. The
Okay.
Mjolnir knockoff. Mjolnir. Yeah, it looks a lot like Mornfang from WoW that you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue with the war gear, or just something you want to say? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, nothing. I was just like interesting.
Yeah. So let's see, the Axe of Hellwinter. Russ's axe, the Axe of Hellwinter, is a weapon of savage elegance and unrivaled lethality. Forged with the kraken teeth, they use kraken teeth a lot. Forged with the kraken teeth of the mysterious beast slain by the Wolf King himself, it is a frost axe of legend, its edge honed to cleave through the toughest foes. The kraken's power is bound within it, and each strike, it sings the song of death. Its edge is sharpened to further its edges sharpened further by a disruption field generator, amplifying its cutting power to the point where it can sunder the heaviest armor with ease. Though it may not hold the dark power of Mjolnir, the Axe of Hellwinter is no less deadly, a weapon of both beauty and brutality wielded by the Wolf King in his endless battle against the enemies of his people. And last we got Scorn Splitter. Once a humble bolter. I like the idea of a humble bolter. Scorn Splitter became a weapon of myth after it was reforged by the hands of the Salamander's Primarch Vulcan. This once simple firearm was transformed into a hand cannon worthy of the Wolf King himself, a weapon of both grace and deadly power. Though the Space Wolves often walked their path alone, the bond forged between them and the Salamanders during the brutal campaign of San Katos led to this rare gift, a symbol of honor and respect between the two Primarchs. Russ, who cherished the bond between his legion and Vulcans, carried this weapon with pride, a reminder of the blood they had shed together and the respect they had earned. Scorn Splitter was no longer just a weapon, it became a part of Russ's legend, a tool of war as much as a mark of brotherhood. So yeah, I'm thinking about Scorn Splitter. I wonder, it says it was reforged by Vulcan, and I'm wondering what kind of modifications were made to it. Like, did it shoot Kraken's teeth to keep with the theme that a lot of Russ's weapons have? But I'm interested as to what else it was. Obviously it was an upgraded bolter of some sort, but like how?
Yeah, I don't know enough to.
Yeah, I'm not
guess.
sure either.
The only picture I can find of it is it in a holster. Oh, actually, no. Joy Toy has a interesting
Action
Joy Toy.
figure.
Yeah, they made an actual revolver. It's a revolver, not a normal bolt gun.
Because it could be a revolving bolt gun.
I mean, yeah, but like all the other pictures of it are just in a holster, so you see the grip, which isn't that helpful. But the Joy Toy Leman Russ, which is officially licensed, it's a revolver.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I like that idea.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can drop that in our other chat so you can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, even the Lexicon page is so funny because it has the model in the holster. Like you just see the grip, but that's it.
Yeah, I just sent you the Joy Toy picture because that is probably the coolest bolter I've seen.
That is very cool. I like that a lot.
And for audio listeners, it looks like, it's the standard size of a bolter, but it looks like it breaks open in the front and swings up, exposing the cylinder, so you could either replace the cylinder or put more shells in the cylinder.
Yeah, very like Colt Peacemaker like.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah. Liar asked about the spear. And earlier on in the chat, the Lorehammer podcast said that he doesn't like the spear a lot. So I'm wondering if it just kind of is a weapon that he was given by the Emperor, but isn't really part of his normal war gear that he fights with. I know, going like way back to a comment I made at the beginning of the episode about like the warp infusion in the Primarchs. I know the spear plays a part in Russ finding out about like that aspect of them being Primarchs, I believe. But yeah, I don't think he actively uses the spear a lot for it being part of his real war gear.
Yeah, and also, I'm just on the Lexicon page. It seems there's there's too much for me to read right at this moment, but I'm getting getting vibes from I believe there's a story of Odin also with his spear, something about getting stabbed and like being able to see fate.
Well, part of Odin's myth was he had to die for like 3 days and hang to gain the power of like runes and magic.
Okay.
So like there is a theme with the Norse. He might have like had to stab himself and then hang himself, but I know like just within like Norse mythology, the idea of like dying or like to gain wisdom is a theme.
Or sacrifice to gain wisdom, yeah, because he also takes out his eye, doesn't he? For knowledge. Yeah, and same thing, obviously that's reflected in Magnus too. Magnus the Red having one eye. But very cool.
Yeah.
And the spirit also
is
called Gungnir. Yeah.
Okay. It is actually called Gungnir.
And yeah, Gungir, which is close enough to Gungnir. Same thing with Mjolnir and Mjolnar.
Again, this is Games Workshop original ideas.
Copy my homework,
TM.
just change it a little.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I think that wraps up everything we have for our notes, and I believe we do have one call-in. Let's see. We have Jax the Werewolf of London. Ow!
Oh my goodness.
Hey, you got the reference. Ow, Werewolves London.
I heard a dog in the background too. I don't know.
Covered.
Oh, that was my dog. Who actually I'll send you a picture of my dog sometime. But she is a 96-pound Great Pyrenees mix, so she's a big white dog.
Nice.
Is she a space wolf or a thunderwolf?
She would absolutely be a thunderwolf.
Excellent.
At least
Or
in her younger
a
days.
wolf.
I would not. But yeah, so Jax, how's it going?
Not bad. Brought
Very
my
good.
drinking horn full of mead, water.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not legal drinking age, Jax.
Yeah, say yeah.
Not in this country.
So Jax, fair enough. But any initial thoughts about the Space Wolves?
Gotta love them. I mean, of course they have their whole Nikea thing, but like as you said, like Russ, like ain't no pussy. He's getting out in the front lines. He's showing what's what.
Yeah, I feel like Space Wolves are one of those chapters that we love to hate, but like honestly, their lore isn't bad or anything. It's just I think people just beat up on the whole wolf thing when it gets too out of hand. Which, on that note, kind of like we did with the Death Guard episode, the number of times we use a word wolf in this episode is 68, and wolves plural 63. So still very heavy on the wolf theme. Which does get grating, and obviously that's why people like to mock them a lot. But yeah, in all honesty, like Space Wolves are pretty cool, and their lore is pretty sweet. Leman Russ himself, pretty sick.
The Lorehammer
Sorry, I'm
podcast
just taking
said they're fun to hate, kind of like Nickelback.
Yeah, yeah, Nickelback. They made their money. They've charted many times. They're not as bad as everyone likes to portray. So.
I didn't know they were hated for a long time, and I heard a couple of their songs. I'm like, oh, these guys are good. And then I looked them up more, and I was like, oh no, I have to die with this knowledge.
Yeah,
it's like the like hating on the popular things.
Yeah,
exactly. And you better believe that Space Wolves are popular. They are.
Oh yeah.
They
have their own codex. They're popular.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they got their own 10th edition codex before every single Chaos Army and most of every Xeno and Imperial Army.
Sounding a little bitter there.
Yeah.
They know what sells.
GW
knows their audience, and they know what sells, and Vikings always sell to GW stands.
So, Jax, was there anything in this episode that like surprised you that you learned, or that maybe changed your mind about something?
I guess in the beginning, Russ was like, okay, he's just that dark Primarch, woof and all. But like after learning like his backstory and everything, like he's a pretty decent guy overall. Like his most notable feat, like when you're getting into 40k, and it's like, what's that Leman Russ guy about? It's like, oh, he screwed over Magnus. And it's like, okay. And that's all you learn about him. And then you dig in a little deeper, and it's like, oh, he pretends to be savage, but he's actually a pretty decent guy.
Well, let's not get carried away. He's more clever than he portrays, but I wouldn't.
He's a sensitive guy.
I love one major thing I learned that I loved in this episode was Leman Russ's whole rivalry with the Dark Angels.
Mm-hmm.
Lion versus wolf. Every time
Right.
you said wolf in this episode, I gotta take a shot.
Yes, a shot of water.
Yeah, he's gonna
drinking
waterlog
under the
himself,
table.
Chad.
Oh, cool, man.
No, but yeah, gotta love the all the rivalries in 40k between the Primarchs, like Jordan versus Perturabo, Russ versus the Lion, Corvus versus Conrad, Gilliman
Russ.
versus everyone.
How dare you? That's not
Right.
even a rivalry.
I
Corax
was
is
gonna
just
say
better.
Russ versus Magnus too is a pretty big one. And
Yeah,
the
true.
Simpsons joke: Russ versus Russ. Down the
Cruz versus himself.
Kurz versus himself. Yeah.
It's Kurz.
There you go.
But then also seeing seeing the the different not just rivalries but alliances where like the strong friendships form, and then you get some of the friendships that then turn into like rivalries and antagonisms.
Fulgrim and Varys
Mhm.
Manus. Yeah.
Well, that rivalry ended very quickly, not gonna lie.
Well, cool, man. Any other thoughts, Jax?
I don't know. I can't wait for more Russ stuff because
It's coming.
after watching this episode, I'm like, Russ is so cool. Except
That's how
the
every
wolf
episode
stuff
gets you,
is very
man.
annoying.
I like everything about Russ but the wolves. Is that your thoughts?
Pretty much. Well, it's like you scroll through their all like on the Warhammer 40k app, you scroll through all their units: Thunderwolf, Wolf Guard, Wolf Cavalry, Wolf Thunderwolves again, the Wolf Lord 2.0, the Wolf Captain. Like,
That was one of the things I was going to mention earlier on in the podcast. Is I think Space Wolves are at their best when they lean more on the Viking and less on the Wolf.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah, and it looks like that's kind of where the big divide is. Like a lot of 40k Space Wolves are more Wolf heavy, and a lot of Heresy era Space Wolves are a lot more Viking heavy. Which obviously
yeah,
makes
I
them
really
the
wish.
superior
I was about to say, I really wish for like Space Wolf modern 40k lore, we got more of them doing like Viking shit. Like, imagine how cool it'd be like on like a Viking style spaceship. A bunch of Space Wolves go out.
Okay, let's
One
not
way
get carried away in the
exploring.
other direction either, though.
And then they
Everything in
start raiding
moderation.
Cow space or something.
You want like a Viking longship, just flip it upside down and send it into space, and there you
Right,
go.
yeah.
I mean,
Just
they do have their one gunboat that's exclusively theirs that no one even has anything close to it. What's that one called?
Something Wolf.
The
I'm sure.
wolf ship.
yeah, the wolf boat.
Yeah, it's like the boarding ship. Yeah.
Hang on. Now I gotta know.
The board wolf.
I say I'm googling Space Wolf gun.
Stormfang. It's the Stormfang gunship.
Stormfang. Okay.
And it has also a secondary build, right?
Storm Wolf.
Yes, I knew there was
Yeah.
a wolf in there.
Hey, there it
The,
is.
Yeah,
the Fang has the
Oh,
giant
neat.
laser, and the Wolf is the transport one.
right.
Well, I'm out.
Cool, man. Thanks for calling in, buddy.
Yep.
All right, I think that was the last call-in, the one and only call-in for tonight. So yeah, let's wrap this up. I guess quick on the call-ins. If you would like to call in or anything like that, like we said at the beginning of the episode, you can sign up for the Patreon. $5 a month. You can watch the videos. You can join us in the live chat. You can do the call-ins as well. Let's see.
And maybe one day you two can lead a Lorehammer episode like Fuzz. If you
maybe one day.
Yeah.
You can sink as low as me and stay up way past your bedtime and do a Lorehammer podcast episode. Let's see. I think we have some other things to shout out. Like I know Christian, you have your Pokélore podcast.
Yeah. So new project.
Star Wars.
Yeah, new project we're trying to start up here is a Pokélore podcast. So far, we're just on YouTube so far, but I am going to transition over onto some podcast platforms in the near future. But I am experimenting with a more visual medium for that. So come check us out on YouTube, Pokélore Podcast. And yeah, if you like Star Wars, come listen to me and Jordan chat about Star Wars on Star Lores.
All right. And Logan, I believe you have some projects that you work on as well.
I do. I have a YouTube channel called Hydra Thoughts, and I'm actually dropping a video tonight, right after we get done with this. I'm editing it right now. But so far we've got a couple on cryptids across America, and tonight, hopefully, you guys will be learning about some Cold War jets and shenanigans with me.
Very
Oh,
cool.
nice. I love it. And I guess I get to do some shout outs as the third host here. One of my projects is sort of on hold right now. I do have a blacksmithing channel on YouTube called Stout Hammer Forge. I'm getting over some busy times in real life, but hopefully going to start putting some more videos back on there for some blacksmithing content. And I also want to shout out, you can, if you're here in the live chat, you can see I'm dressed up in skins and a Viking tunic and stuff. So I'm just going to shout out LARPing in general. We're all a bunch of nerds here. Just give it a try. It's a lot of fun. There's local LARPing chapters all over the country. You can find them, just searching through things like Facebook and stuff. It might seem like it's too nerdy for you, but it's a good time.
It's not too nerdy for you. You're just pretending you're too cool for it.
It's never too nerdy.
Fuzz, I didn't know you were a blacksmith. That's very fitting for an episode such as this.
I appreciate it. Yeah. It is a hobby turned into sort of part-time job. And last thing that I want to do is shout out our new Patreon patrons. We've got Oscar and John 10. Thank you both very much for joining the Imperial Tithe.
Thank you.
Every little bit helps to support Mark and the Lorehammer podcast keep going.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining us. And everyone have a good night.
Later.